was on the table, so this is for all of us. Pat's just getting us prepared.
What's that?
I don't know, it's thick.
It's 161.
It's got a bunch of papers.
I know.
I think it's individual.
Let's wait until we get there.
Yeah, okay.
Do you need a motion to open?
I think we need a motion to open, and then any revisions to our agenda.
I make a motion to open.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any additions or omissions?
Is a request to continue, and it's for an RDA 133 Maple Street.
Want to do that now?
Everything else is on.
So I'll take that's in an RDA, so it can be any time. I'll take a motion to continue that.
Make a
Do we have
motion.
a time, Pat?
To continue 133
I
Maple
believe
Street.
for the next meeting.
To the next meeting,
Yeah.
April.
April 5th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, 4, 5. I make a motion, we accept the agenda as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good, thanks. Well, 6:20. Would you like to, somehow you got to the top of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I wanted an opportunity to address the board about the FY18 budget and my recommendation to create the position of Director of Planning and Development. I've been in touch with Mr. Snow about it, and we thought it would be a good idea to speak to the whole commission. I've already been to the planning board meeting, and also the advisory board, and the Economic Development Commission has reviewed this as part of their agenda, so you're last in line. I've included a variety of information about my rationale for this. These are excerpts from the budget message that's posted on the town website. I've attached the job description and also a listing of all the communities that have this position in some form or another. Just if I can briefly tell you why I think this is necessary. I think I'm preaching to the choir when I say that, you know, we have a tremendous amount of development going on. We have coastal issues, we have wetlands issues, we have building on more and more marginal pieces of land. And while we have a talented group of individuals in planning, building, and conservation, there's really nobody looking at it from a 10,000-foot level to see how we all coordinate and work together. And then the other piece to that is economic development, which is very much part of land use as well. And the town planners have probably been doing that, squeezing out that time for the last 2 years to work with consultants to do a lot of studies. But what's happened now is we have a lot of good information in hand and studies to really hit the ground running with visioning from Greenbush and North Scituate to the signage. And I think we need someone outfitted by education and experience to work with the department heads, be an advocate for them, also be available to developers and homeowners to work through any bottlenecks in the review process. I think there are opportunities for us to improve development turnaround time. It's not through any fault of the staff, but when somebody's focus is to look at all 3 departments as one and not individually as silos, I think there's economies of scale that can be realized. The position is revenue neutral, which means that it's not taking money from other programs or services. The Economic Development Commission budget was reduced to fund this position, as well as a reduction in the building department. We used to have 2 full-time building inspectors in the building department. Neil Duggan retired. He now works for us part-time, so we were able to capture that salary to fund this salary as well. The position, I think, will afford a number of benefits. Patrick and Laura both asked for staff positions in their budget in FY18, and last year, the Economic Development Commission has asked for staffing. So it's a question of us really needing to have more bodies around development and focusing, I think, on a global approach to development from all the good work the boards and committees are doing around it. So that's it really quickly. There's probably more than you need to know. We're not breaking new ground here. This position is very prevalent for communities our size particularly. I've spoken with the staff, and as I mentioned, I've spoken with the other boards and committees as well. The Planning Board voted unanimously to support it last Thursday. The Economic Development Commission's in favor of it. Both the chair and the vice chair attended the Planning Board meeting to speak in favor of it. And I think advisory hasn't voted yet, but they're inclined to do that. And obviously, I think the selectmen are on board. So I don't want to say too much, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have or concerns.
Sure. And we appreciate that, your heads up with this early on. Obviously, it impacts our board, and so we appreciate being part of that process. You and I have had some conversation before, and I think it's a good idea to come before the board. There might be individual questions. I've seen it in other towns. We know that everything, like you pointed already out, it gets more complex. There's more facets to permitting, things that go on in the town, and there's a lot of interaction now between planning, conservation, zoning. Those things happen on a regular basis. A lot of these projects are all in multiple resource areas or jurisdiction, and there always this overlap. And I think it's commendable that the different the agents or whatever have already done a good job of sort of trying to catch up with each other, but certainly someone coordinating those efforts and being able to help with that is a positive piece. I think the other part that you mentioned, which is really important, is the workload on everybody. There's a lot, all the development's ramped up everywhere, and it puts a load on all these folks. And I guess a little bit of clarification, like, there are more complicated projects than others. Some of these are fairly simple, straightforward projects that probably don't need the oversight of someone, but there's certainly a lot of these projects. We have a large development off of Hadley Road coming on board, and we've had multiple projects. So that the person that takes this position will obviously be very involved with those kind of things, I would assume, to help.
Yeah, I think there's big picture stuff, but I think the employees need a resource. One of the things I didn't mention is this requires an administrative code change under the town charter, because what will happen is the Director of Planning and Development will actually have the Conservation and Natural Resources Officer, the Town Planner, and the Building Commissioners report to them and their staff. So it's actually creating a department of development and community and development and planning, so that everybody is sort of on the same page and they can, shepherd those big projects together as well. I have 23 direct reports. Pat would be the first person to tell you it's hard to get to see me. We're doing a lot in town, and sometimes that stymies the process as well. The development review team meets every 2 weeks, but this person will be a direct report, and resource for those department heads.
Just one other thing, and I'll give the others the opportunity to ask a question, but there was one spot that I noticed, it mentioned possibly Board of Health, and I was just curious how that would...
Yeah. In a perfect world, it would be Board of Health because they're involved in development, but because the job is already pretty robust, especially with the economic development piece, it will just be those divisions: building, economic development, conservation, and planning. I don't think Board of Health at this point right now is something that we can take on.
I just look at from a contractor standpoint, I look at the sign-off sheet that we have to get for a permit. Board of Health is obviously the other entity, but they also have another whole gamut that they serve outside of... Yes,
that's an excellent point, Frank. Septic site reviews and stuff are a very small portion of what they do. But because of the development, it's a larger portion here. But
Sure.
most of the Board of Health activities focused on, food inspections, our hoarding issue, emergency response. They're in charge of sheltering operations, hazardous nurse duties, the flu clinics, Lyme disease. So I don't, you're right. It's just a small portion, but here a larger portion of their day-to-day.
Yeah, just, and one other quick one from me, I know another piece that takes up a big part of Pat's time, Laura's time, is CRS pieces. Will that person get involved in that sort of?
So Nancy Durfee does all that right now.
great.
So indirectly, Nancy reports to the planner and to Pat right now. So she'll fall under that wing. But she does the CRS program with
Okay.
assistance from other departments because so much information is needed from the
It's
other
made it
departments.
a lot better with Nancy as
Yeah.
part, that's for sure.
Well, we have the highest rating in the Commonwealth for CRS right now.
Awesome.
So, and that's largely due to the efforts of the staff in development and Nancy.
Sure. Right. Penny?
No, I don't have any questions.
Richard?
The question I had, actually, you already answered, and that's where in the town organization this fit in, so you
Yeah.
answered that. Thank you.
It sounds like it should help efficiency and coordination with all these projects.
I think it should, Paul. I mean, it shouldn't, we have a long turnaround time, but there's things that are like falling through the cracks, like we should be doing more online, and we have, the permitting and the GIS and stuff, but there's not somebody that's sort of following up on stuff. We talk about it and stuff and following up, and that's just stuff that the development staff can't get to. And so instead of like the economic development, at the end of the day, Laura's doing all that wonderful work. We have somebody who that's actually in their job description to do, so we can do that. Because we're really behind on the GIS through no fault of folks' own, but that's really something that's really important, I think we need to have.
Lisa?
I think it's a well-needed position, and I think it's going to help lighten the load for a lot of departments and expedite things.
Thanks.
Yeah, the oversight will be great for everybody.
We're kind of hoping it keeps their feet to the fire.
There's lots of fires.
Well, and part of the problem is in planning and conservation in particular, we have two incumbents that are workaholics and are actually, in terms of productivity, doing the work more of 1.5 to 2 people than one person. And despite their supervisor telling them to go home, they often ignore that. I'm not looking at you, Pat. But, that's something, too, to help manage those people in terms of work-life balance,
That'd be
which
great.
is an issue, yeah. So, great.
Pat, you?
Well, I came from a town that had that model, and it worked out well. And I looked through the notes, and it looks like I won't have to do a budget.
No, you won't.
Along to the new place.
There you go. Great. Well, you're right in front of us, so I'd take a motion to endorse.
What is the position called, Trish?
Director of Planning and Development.
I make a motion that we support the appointing of a Director of Planning and Development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot.
you.
The
Appreciate
Board
it.
of Selectmen, as part of the charter, has to have a public hearing on this, and it will be at its April 4th meeting, so
Okay.
I'll send out a reminder to folks, but again, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Do you want to do these couple of other RDAs, or do you want to move right to your notices and come back to these?
You have a 6:30 start time for one.
You got a crowd here for that one, do you want to?
Go.
I'm going to recluse myself for
Got it.
Sunset Road.
Got it. So we're going to go right into the continuation of the hearing for 23 Sunset Road, Norton.
You guys read the email?
Oh, yeah, I saw this one. I saw this one. But it doesn't say any specifics on what they're
For
lacking.
those of you who are here specifically for this particular hearing, let me just refresh the very few ground rules there are. Mr. Morse will update us on answers to questions that he has been asked to provide to the town. Our agent will respond to that, and any questions from up here will come then, and then it will be open for your questions. And I would appreciate it if you would keep it on the subject that we're dealing with, which is only conservation issues for this situation. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. Greg Morse, Registered Engineer, Morse Engineering. Attorney Chris Fine, the applicant's representative as well tonight. This is a continued notice of intent hearing for a proposed single-family home at McLean Drive at the end of Sunset Road. Since the last meeting, we've received correspondence from an abutters engineer, CHA Consulting, representing the Bristols, which are immediately to the east of the proposed project. I also met with Agent Galvin, discussed the project. Town Council was at that meeting. I've gone through some of the boxes of files at the Conservation Office, and there were really 5 standout items that I took away from the last meeting. I'd like to run through those real briefly and then focus on 3 of them. The 3 that I really want to focus on tonight, there are 2 outstanding enforcement orders, which I would like to fully discuss. And I'd also like to discuss and get a ruling on whether the stormwater bylaw is applicable to this site or not. So since the last meeting, the issues that have come up when I met with Agent Galvin, signatures of all the owners on the notice of intent. I'd like to submit that. We have copies of signatures from all of the owners and powers of attorneys authorizing this filing. That was number 1. Number 2, there was a question on whether the project was subject to a Chapter 90 license for working on filled land. As you recall, a portion of this property was previously filled. It was referred to as the guzzle on some of the old subdivision maps. We've confirmed that the area we're proposing the work in the project is outside the limits of that guzzle. It is not in an area that's mapped by the DEP as being filled area. And I believe Agent Galvin spoke with the DEP and confirmed that the license is not required for this project. Thirdly, a question came up regarding the presence of a coastal bank at this property. The FEMA floodplain encompasses almost the entire lot. We're in the FEMA Zone AE 15, land subject to coastal storm flowage. As such, there is a coastal bank. The coastal bank is on the westerly side of the property. It actually exists on the abutter's property, the Bristol property. It's located in an area that's grassed lawn in its present condition. It has a sewer pipe owned by the town of Scituate underneath it. I'll be preparing a narrative and submitting that prior to our next meeting, but the performance standards associated with Coastal Bank primarily address 2 issues. They address the ability of the Coastal Bank to provide sediment to down gradient resource areas, and we'll be making a presentation that as a grassed lawn, this Coastal Bank is not providing sediment. The other purpose of a coastal bank being that a coastal bank provides storm damage prevention. That being when we do have a floodplain at elevation 15 such as this, when we do experience the 100-year flood event, that we're not impacting that bank's ability to provide protection to up-gradient properties. Again, the Bristol's property being up-gradient. Our presentation will be that our project is on pilings. We are not physically touching the bank. And furthermore, the performance standards associated with a bank specifically have to do with the bank itself in the land that's landward of the bank, not the land that is down gradient of the bank, such as us. That gives us to the last 2 major pieces of the puzzle that I took from the last meeting, one being the stormwater bylaw applicability. The Bristol's engineer did address this in his letter. I make reference that in his letter he cites the old stormwater bylaw that was adopted in 2008 As you're aware, this commission and the town as a whole revised the stormwater bylaw at spring town meeting 2015, just last year. I have a copy of the stormwater bylaw here. If we can read through the 4 thresholds of applicability of the bylaw, you will see that the site does not meet any of the thresholds as regulated activities. Section 4 of the bylaw, this is section 32050 of our town's general bylaws, is the stormwater bylaw. The applicable activities, section 4A. Number 1, all development and redevelopment projects that will disturb over 15,000 square feet of land. We're not proposing to disturb over 15,000 square feet of land with this project. Second trigger, a project that will render 25% or more of an undeveloped lot impervious, or increase impervious area of a developed lot by 25% or more. On this property here, we're not proposing any impervious surface. The building itself is elevated up above the ground. We're not rendering any of the site impervious. Furthermore, I would add that our site is 4.79 acres in size. Our building, as you see it, although it's not impervious, accounts for 2,288 square feet. That's less than 1% of the overall site being covered by this building. Threshold number 2, all development and redevelopment projects that disturb or alter 1,000 square feet of land or undisturbed natural slopes greater than 25%. We don't have any slopes that are greater than 25% on this site. It's a relatively flat site that is based on the topography that's been provided and depicted on the plans. Threshold number 3 of the bylaw, construction of a new drainage system or alteration of a drainage system serving a drainage area of more than 15,000 square feet of land. We are not proposing to construct any drainage system. We're not proposing any alteration to any drainage systems with this project. In threshold number 4, any development or redevelopment involving land uses with higher potential pollutant loads. A single-family home is not a project with higher potential pollutant loads. It's our understanding that we do not meet any of the thresholds of the bylaw and that it should not be applicable to this site. We would like a ruling, if we can, on that. Want to get into that, or should we get into enforcement orders?
Yeah, why don't we hold on the enforcement orders for a second? I think on the stormwater bylaw, I agree with what you've read in the bylaw there. The only thing that would probably lead to it being triggered is if some fill from a previous violation needed to be removed, then that could get into the point where you trigger it. So at this point, that we don't know whether something is going to be removed, we should hold off on a decision on that. The other thing is, I had a conversation with somebody at Mass DEP about the Chapter 91 licenses. I don't know if you spoke with them too. And I'd like to get something in writing from them, and I can look into that if you want to talk to them too, because something was filled in the past there, and a long time has gone by, and there's been different uses and what is the condition since. So it sounded like they were not going to require Chapter 91, but I'd like to just probably get something.
Is that something you can request from them?
Yeah, when I spoke with them, I said I probably need something right, and I haven't yet, but I will.
Okay, great. So the stormwater bylaw, the threshold that we're referring to is the threshold that disturbs or alters more than 15,000 square feet of land. We are under that threshold as the project is currently before you, but yes, if we revise the plans and exceed that 15,000 square feet, we would be subject. Jumping on to item number 5, the enforcement orders. There were 2 enforcement orders issued for this project. They're outstanding enforcement orders. I haven't found anything in the records that indicate that they've been closed out. The first one was issued in 1998 to the McDonald family. It was in regards to construction of McLean Drive, the subdivision road at the bottom of the plan here. That enforcement order itself, it doesn't identify whether the person at that time, McDonald, whether they were filling wetlands or whether they were filling buffer zone. The specific extent and type of activity says alteration, filling, and construction of a roadway and installation of utilities on property located in an area under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. I've dug through the files. I haven't found any quantities or specific locations other than the McLean Drive Road that identify which areas, whether it's buffer zone or resource area, that were impacted. I imagine seeing the location of the isolated wetland and seeing the location of the BVW, those are the two resource areas we're talking about, but I haven't been able to quantify that. The enforcement order is almost 20 years old. We realize we do have to close it out, but we'd like to discuss specifically what would be acceptable to the commission. It's unknown to us what was done at that point in time. The second enforcement order was issued in 2003 against Baron Joseph at the end of Roberts Drive. That property is shown on our plan. It's identified as an assessor's parcel 19G. It's part of this application. In that enforcement order, again, was fairly vague. It did say clear cutting of bordering vegetated wetlands. It did not say filling. It did say clear cutting of bordering vegetated wetlands. What I did find in the file, I found a bunch of stuff. I found a diagram that was prepared by the town of Scituate showing the area in question when the town was trying to put a sewer line through this location. I found two historical photos. I'm going to pass them around. In these photographs, Roberts Drive was not constructed. I consider this to be maybe circa 1970s in this photo, based on that evidence. What I see in this photo is I have a semi-color copy. It's a little bit easier to see. What I see in this is that our area in question does have what appears to me significant upland or gravel in the location of this site. It doesn't appear that it was a significant wetland area or a depression, at least in the photograph. I printed out copies of the ortho photos from the Mass website. These photographs are from 1990 in black and white, all the way up through the 2000s. I will pass these around. They depict the area. You don't see any significant change in the photos, nothing that's pointing me to a specific area for the alterations. We also came across some correspondence from the town administrator at that time, Richard Agnew, and Baron Joseph, discussing the enforcement on his property. That correspondence appeared to be that the town in Joseph were going to work in conjunction with the sewer project, which ran a sewer pipe through the Joseph's property, in doing some wetland replication work. Again, it was a letter between the two of them, but it did not definitively say whether that work was done. And again, there's been no follow-up on the enforcement order since then. That being said, what we'd like to do is we'd really like to talk about the enforcement orders. The areas, if you go out there right now, behind the Joseph property, are fully vegetated. If it was bordering vegetated wetland that had been cleared, I suspect at this point, in excess of 14 years later, it would have revegetated naturally if fill hasn't been placed on the site. The enforcement order said that, well, it doesn't indicate that fill was brought onto the Joseph site. Along McLean Drive, we'd be talking about removing some of the gravel that's been placed in McLean Drive and revegetating some of that area. I don't know if you found anything further, Pat, but the files are pretty vague on these two enforcement orders at this point.
Both enforcement orders called for work to be done by the people who were involved in violation, and it stops right there. There's no evidence that there was any restoration or even flagging or identification. And the next flagging is years later with the order of ORAD.
So, I mean, recognizing that they still have to be closed out, how do we get to the bottom line of what has to be done to get them even enforced?
Right, I mean, I think if you go through the record, you're gonna come up with what Greg came up with, so I don't know if DEP or anybody at the time would have anything more. I mean, it was filed with them too, so. I mean, there's been anecdotal conversations about truckloads of fill being brought in, and that was probably for the gravel road area, not for Mr. Joseph's area that might have been clear cut. It was, I believe, before any of you were on the commission.
No, you were on, weren't you?
I wasn't on the commission at that time, but I remember all the goings-on out there. I've been around a long time. So, personally, I come back to that enforcement order, not so much the Josephs, that's way over on the other side. My problem is the gravel that was brought in 98, 97, whenever they actually did it, in that era. And I still contend that's what made this isolated, that it was all attached. It was one huge bordering vegetated wetland. So I just keep coming back there that until all that gravel you dig down, I mean, we can find out what was the norm that somebody would bring in at that time, take a consensus of different contractors, take the average, how much gravel was probably brought in there, and once we remove that, I think we no longer have isolated. We have one huge bordering vegetated wetlands, and I think that's the crux of the whole problem on this site.
Didn't we talk at some point in time about doing some borings to find out
Yeah,
what was
but
underneath
it hasn't
this?
been done, to my knowledge.
Right, to find out if it's peat
But,
underneath there or not?
well, they're talking the enforcement order.
Right.
Now, the enforcement order is on that road.
Right.
That it was to be removed, and nothing ever happened, and nothing ever happened, and here we are. It's 2017, and this is 98, so it's been 19 years that nobody's done anything about it. So, I mean, if you go, that's the crux of the whole problem of this site being built on. Is it or isn't it isolated? Or was it at the time that road was put in?
Right. The 2009 review of the wetland areas, the ANRAD, it was more concerned with lots on the other side of McLean.
Yeah, I was out there when DEP came out because it was appealed. And we just kind of went, oh, well, let's just forget about that over there. That was not our concern the day we were out there, to even go into that side of the roadway. Okay, we were strictly concerned with the big field, the pumpkin patch, as it was called, because they were trying to build, they wanted to build there. And that's where our concern was, that's where all the holes were dug, the soil samples were taken. If we did walk by, and there was some casual comments made on the other side, but nothing definitive, because that was not our purview at the time. The purview was the big open field, the pumpkin patch, and whether or not that, was wetlands, which they said the whole place was. So.
No questions at this time.
Lisa?
I don't have any questions right now.
I don't know what the solution is for your issue, so.
Well, there's an
That's my only
enforcement order,
concern.
it has to be taken out, and I think before we go any farther, it would be very interesting to get a consensus of what the normal truckloads, how many would have been used to create a roadway like that, and get it out, and then do some soil samples. Let's see what's out there.
It would seem to me, and I'm by no means an engineer, but it would seem to me that if gravel was put in there, if there was fill put in there, it would be pretty easy to ascertain how deep it is and how much is there, because it's not going to filter much deeper down than what was filled. And I'm sensing an agreement already that it's going to have to come out one way or another. And it would seem to me, this is just my thinking, and I'll look for consensus, that that would be the next point that has to be done before we can even move further.
Yeah, we also run it by, legal counsel at the last meeting as to, how far back you go on an enforcement order, whether you can revisit it, and also if a superseding order of resource area delineation has been issued, do we stick to that, or can we go back further than that? Because that's the most recent resource area delineation.
But we weren't focusing on this piece of property. We didn't even look at it.
Right.
The NRED that was previously filed was for another completely separate assessor's map.
Exactly. So that really has no bearing on this project.
Of course, we'd certainly be willing to go out and do some test pits in the roadway, determine the extent of that gravel, so that way we can quantify it. To me, that's a logical approach. That's what I was semi-expecting to hear, aside from someone pulling out pictures and saying, here's pictures of what was done, and here's a quantity or an area. I haven't been able to find that. Going out, quantifying the gravel that's put in place, it's the most logical thing that I can think of at this time for this enforcement order.
Yeah, and then we could have a better idea, I feel, of what we're actually dealing with out there.
Pat, is there any rule, regulation that would prevent that from happening, having test pits made first?
No, that can be done.
Okay. And I would view that as a first step, not a final step.
Yeah, there were, on the list of things that were sent you, you did address a bunch of other things. There was, one of the other questions that came up too is the area for the replication. And there were two questions about that. Was that possibly a wetland at one area and now it's filled in, and can it be used as a replication area? The other thing is the distance from an abutting property. If you're creating a wetland near someone else's property, you need permission from the property owner. And that's, you're kind of tied up against it where you could put a replication area. That would be something that would be interesting to find out progress.
Yeah, addressing both of those. The area that we're proposing for restoration is that area that's right behind the Joseph House right now.
Yeah, where he
which
cut.
Which is allegedly where he cut. The black and white photos from 1990 show that as cleared though. So his violation was in 2003. That's the area where we're proposing for our replication. I don't know if his cutting was the fringe to widen that area out or not. The photos from 1990 all the way up through today show that same area as being cut.
So you're just you're putting a replication area in something that was already a wetland? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know that that was a wetland in the past at that location. Today, based on our scientist and based on the one that was hired, that's upland area where we're proposing the replication. The enforcement order says cutting, it doesn't say filling. So if that was wetland and it was cut, it would likely grow back as wetland area unless the ground was altered in any way. And I don't see that the ground was altered in any way, aside from the cutting. The physical location of that replication, which is the second piece of the agent's questioning here, he's correct. We are supposed to maintain a buffer from that wetland to the abutting properties, so we will likely be moving that replication area anyways, further away from the abutting properties to comply with the setbacks.
Do you have enough upland there to do it?
I think there is enough upland further down on the lot. We'll be shifting it to the west, probably 40 to 50 feet in size.
The other thing we were wondering if there were anything that was triggered by DPW work, if they were running water lines or sewer lines or doing work out there, would they have had to have filed and shown the work that they were doing? Or was the road totally done on a private
The road was originally approved on a subdivision, I believe, in the 50s. No work was ever built on it to construct it up until the late 90s, I think in 1997. Water line went in, gravel went in. At the end of that gravel line, which is in the middle of this cul-de-sac, there's a hydrant. The hydrant exists today. I don't know that it was ever inspected by DPW, but the line is in and the hydrant is in.
Because there are people that were around working at DPW at that time that we could talk to about this.
But Pat, the town did put those lines in. They did come across, but the town did not put the gravel in. And the gravel is what has cut this piece of property.
I don't think there's a dispute about that.
Yeah, so I don't really know if you need to...
Information about the whole time period and what work was done and what was permitted and what was in violation.
Yeah. I just don't think it's going to have any bearing from the people I've talked to. But that's okay if you want to do it. Be my
Right, I mean, I
guest.
think the idea of doing some test pits along the gravel road area would be...
Something on
Okay. All right. Any other questions here?
I think we did discuss the test pits last time, didn't we?
Well, we did,
We
but
we brought it up,
just
but now we're moving to getting it done. Getting it done.
We also had soil samples from the wetland scientists from back in 2012, but I believe none of those took place in this area. Those were, where the farm area was pumpkin patch. I don't think he did any along the west side of McLean.
Pat, I have a comment.
Okay, we're going to get to questions now. Do you have any more comments for now? Are you good for now, Greg? Okay. I'm glad to have questions from the audience. I just want to repeat. First of all, let me say, nothing's going to be finalized tonight. This is going to be continued again, so do not worry about that. It's not going to be voted yes, not going to be voted no. There are still many considerations underway here, and you've heard only a couple that have been addressed tonight. But I am happy to have questions. Please give your name and address and make your questions concise.
I'm one of the owners of that parcel along those 5 acres. And I live in Paxton, Massachusetts. Relative to this sampling that you guys are leaning towards for the McLean Drive, do we have to get an okay from you as to the sampling grid for that area before we go out and do some of these borings? Or are we going to provide data on a sampling basis according to which individual we hire to represent us to do a representative job of what exists under the ground?
Are you asking if you
need your approval for a sampling grid for McLean Drive for these borings?
Right, that's a good question, because it is in the buffer area, maybe an area that has been filled.
Yeah.
So,
There was an enforcement order, and ordinarily, if there was a current enforcement order, you could say, under the enforcement order, we could allow some test pits to be done, as long as it was in an area that was up.
And we all know what's going to be found underneath the gravel. It's going to be dredge spoils.
I'm sorry?
Dredge spoils will be found under that. It's just a matter of how deep the gravel goes before the interface between the gravel and the dredge material is deciphered.
but we have agreed that this is a step that must be done in order to get the order even enforced at this point. So,
Does the town of Scituate need any nice clean gravel?
right now, we're just doing, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hi, Gabe Crocker, registered professional engineer with CHA, representing Jim and Mary Bristol at 19 Sunset Road. While we're on that issue, in particular with the roadway, the letter from the commission, September 27, 2007, specifically says you're required to obtain the services of a wetland scientist and have that consultant review all applicable documents, have the property surveyed, and have a proposed restoration plan prepared for review by the commission. So I would submit to you that the typical process here would be the applicant would engage, obviously, Mr. Morse, but also their environmental scientists, they would come forward to you with with a proposed program for testing. The commission should then have that reviewed by Bob Gray to make sure the commission, who's your consultant, and make sure that you're in agreement before they go out and do it. Otherwise, it may happen 2 or 3 times. I think that's to the benefit of everybody, including the applicant, that process be followed.
And that's exactly how it would be carried out if there was an enforcement order file right now. If there's an old one like that, it may be that we need to file.
May need an actual filing.
Right.
A separate filing from the one that you currently have.
Right.
Yep.
That could be answered by DEP.
We, obviously, part of our letter, we had raised our concerns about the enforcement orders. We would suspect that we'll find the same thing as it relates to the road. You get below it, you're going to be into wetland, which leads to the issue that Penny was relating to. So we're happy to see that these are coming to light and will be addressed.
Right.
From a big picture perspective, I take a look at where we are in the process now, and I question where do we go from here, and I think you were asking the same questions. Before you is a notice of intent application that has with it the resource area delineation from which you are to then judge whether this development is appropriate. But until such time that these enforcement orders are carried out, a restoration program is presented, approved, and carried out, you actually have no basis from which to finalize the resource area delineation in which to judge the development that's before you. So I think we feel like that we've got the cart before the horse. We've got the development application, but what really should be before you prior to the development application is the restoration program. Otherwise, you have no basis to, have no way of approving the resource areas that are before you.
So you're thinking that maybe these lines will change?
They're going to change with the restoration. And we just heard right now what you see. Can I approach?
Absolutely.
What you see, one of the items that we were just talking about, I put to sleep. Is you've got an area here bisecting what's identified currently as bordering vegetated wetland versus the isolated wetland. If you take that out, what we heard is you're likely to find dredge spoils under it. So if this area goes away, the buffer zones change, this isolated wetland would actually be bordering vegetated wetland. The very nature of the type of wetland would change. Not that it matters a ton under the local bylaw. The local bylaw treats BVW the same as it treats isolated. So the project is still proposed in a wetland. But it's important that the application before you ultimately have all of the resource areas associated with the entire parcel before you correct in order for you to make a judgment about a development that's proposed on it.
I think your point's well taken, and I think we're trying to get to the point that you say, and I think Mr. Morse has made it clear that he understands that he may have to make revisions on this. So maybe it is slightly, as you say, the cart before the horse, but I think we're going to end up in the same place. I really do.
The question becomes, what's the process to get there, right? At the same time, you really don't, it wouldn't be appropriate for the commission to consider, in my opinion, the restoration program as part of this notice of intent application, because you'd be in a position where, whether you approve or deny, if you chose to deny the development, you'd also be denying the restoration program. So it's very important that these enforcement orders be addressed, and addressed first, then move on, specifically because they can't be tied together. Because of that very issue. Otherwise, the developer sits before you and says, hey, you want the restoration? Give me my house.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I believe what I kind of heard, okay, is my feeling is this application is on hold. It's been tabled tonight, in a sense. This enforcement he is going to have to file, Pat?
I think we need a legal opinion on it.
Yeah, oh, okay. So
I know what you're saying.
we're not going at least, maybe I'm wrong, but what I'm feeling, I'm not gonna look at this again until we find out what's underneath that road and the restoration is done. Then, we'll come back to this. This is just gonna get continued and continued. But I do believe, my understanding is that Greg will have to, or the applicant, Greg will do it for the applicant, file to get this squared away, because that's been kind of my contention from the get-go. How can I look at this project until I know what's underneath there? And that doesn't belong there. If it was legally put in, that'd be a whole different ballgame, but it wasn't.
Oh, I'm sorry, Penny.
Yeah, the roadway was never legally put in, the
We
gravel.
have more than that. We have the other enforcement order, which could also change things.
Well, I'm just wondering,
On the Josephs,
I
yeah.
apologize, I don't have the
Yeah.
enforcement orders in front of me, but they don't have the restoration plans or the restoration directions in them, do they?
No,
There's an enforcement order that needs to be dealt with.
Right.
it was never done.
Restoration plan would be, first, the applicant's going to be required to do the study and come forward with the evidence. Then they're going to have to present to you a proposed restoration program, which you would review under an application. That would get approved, that would get completed. Then you'd move on with a resource area delineation that's got the revised limits in order to judge the application for development before.
But has the site changed, I guess, since that time to where the restoration plan that would be filed wouldn't be appropriate for the conditions that are there now?
Right.
I mean, could that be, is that a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you have to have the environmental scientists, on both yours and theirs, along with the engineers involved in the study. It's got to be studied, and the data needs to be prepared and presented so that you can properly judge it.
Sure.
And that's going to be our next step.
Yeah.
I have one more comment, please.
Yes, sir.
I would just say that because the town or one of its contractors, as far as I know, did put in that water line some years back, it disturbed the vertical profile of the area. So any sampling that is done, unless you want to do a transverse across McLean Drive to see how big the ditch became when they dug it for the line, and a longitudinal to see how far down toward Baron Joseph's it goes. I'm concerned because it's probably going to show disturbance. And a lot of the disturbance may be when that water line is put in.
Thank you.
And if I might add to that, I understand that the town itself used this property to store construction materials. We have photographs, and we don't know what was stored there, but there were piles, I believe, of gravel. That wasn't put there by anyone but the town. So that's another thing to consider.
You know, we're bickering over, there's a roadway there. That's all I want looked at. All right, if there's a pile of gravel over here or there that was left when we, had permission to use it, we're not looking at that. There's a definite roadway was put in. All you have to do is walk out there and you see it. That's what we're concerned about.
And I understand, and just, with all due respect, I think it needs to be made known that none of the applicants themselves had anything to do with that road or what was decided in the past. I think the board should be made aware of that, and I think some of the people in the audience should be made aware of that as well. We're happy to remedy anything that needs to be remedied, but we need to know what to do. For example, we're being told now to go and do the test pits on the road, which we're happy to do. But then we're going to come back and we're going to be told to do something different with respect to Lot 8, and they're both in the same situations. These enforcement orders from 1998 and 2003 were essentially abandoned, weren't they? Nothing was done. right? I mean, can we be told, can we be given a little bit more guidance on what to do with respect to Lot 8 at this point?
Where's Lot 8?
That's the land
The
behind
Josephs?
Joseph's property, correct. Which is fully revegetated at this point.
Yeah, I just had a question on what you were talking about as to how the gravel got there. Was it in your understanding, a town project where gravel was brought in, or was
No.
it property owners?
This is separate. I'm not talking about the original construction of the road. I'm talking about what's happened more recently, where the town was using that to store construction materials for some other project.
Right, okay.
Right.
But we're not going to look at those mounds. You're going to, Richard?
Yes, sir.
Just to follow up on that.
Name?
I think I would suggest that the proper way to do it is the applicant, it's the applicant's responsibility, not the commission's responsibility to
Right.
put the program together. We would suggest that the commission require the applicant to put the proposed soils testing evaluation program together of what they propose to do. They come in with Greg and their environmental scientist, have Bob Gray here, and have that evaluated and reviewed in the open meeting. Specifically to his point, nobody wants to come back and do it 3 or 4 times, so put the program together in a comprehensive way, present it as part of likely a separate application, if that's required, and have it out. I think that's the proper way to do it.
Pat, are we sure we need a separate application?
Well, I think we need to talk to legal counsel and look at, what happens with enforcement orders that are 20 years old, we start over and we may need to file and start from scratch on that. And then what type of applications needed to do test pits. We can find that out. And then I'd like to talk to DPW just to see what information they would have about this whole thing. And so, I mean, I could work with DPW and DEP on that, and then the next step is how we go about the test pit, whether, there's filing, there's, and who we involve, whether we bring in our wetland person on that. So,
And what's a reasonable time frame for that? I'm sorry to even ask you that, but
The test pits for exploratory purposes, typically if they're filled in, are an exempt activity. We've come in with RDAs for those in the past. They've always been issued negative determinations when they're in the buffer zone. We're in an area that's clearly identified as a road. We're just trying to quantify the depths of the gravel. It's something a mini excavator could do fairly easily without very much disturbance. If we could proceed with that, we could then develop a restoration plan. In that time frame, you could check with your legal counsel, and we could certainly discuss on our side whether the enforcements be handled through a restoration NOI, which is a completely separate application, or whether they're lumped under this NOI. Either way, I think you could run both of them concurrent with a proposed project. We would show our proposed restoration areas and comply with any setbacks to those as if they were a fully functioning wetland. We'd have to hold the setbacks to them. You wouldn't have to wait until it's constructed and then come back to this project. That's how I'd like to proceed. I'd like to at least have permission to do the test pits as an exempt activity in the buffer zone, to quantify that gravel and then put together that restoration plan and either present it under this NOI or a restoration NOI to be determined.
if we did, if we received an RDA application by Friday or Monday, and then we had that on the agenda for April
5th.
April 5th is the next one?
Yeah.
That would give us a chance to talk with legal counsel, with DPW, and if it were approved that night, then test pits could take place. I agree with you. I think an RDA would cover it. I just don't think we could just do it with what we have now. Unless legal counsel says otherwise. If they say, the past outstanding EO, go ahead and try to get as much information as you can, I could find that out. Otherwise, if it requires an RDA, we got one soon, and we can get that on for the 5th. And then continue this out for like a month from now. To be the
19th.
19th.
sense?
Okay. So would you do me a favor and summarize what you just said so everybody can understand what's going to happen? Because I think I got it, but I wouldn't be able to spit it back.
Okay, so we think there should be at least some type of official application to go out to do the test pits to see what's under the road. And if that gets into the newspaper by next week, we could have that voted on the...
5th of April.
5th of April. So that would get that taken care of. In the meantime, we'll talk to legal counsel, find out how long an enforcement order is good for, and different areas of the site. If they're not relevant to this, can we eliminate them as part of the testing? And then we could also see if DPW, Public Works Department, has any information from when they did the work out there on the road. And then some of the things that were brought up tonight, we have in the minutes, and they sound like reasonable requests from both sides.
So what that basically, I'll take it a little further. All we would probably vote on the 5th was to allow, or the procedure for having the test pits done, and it would be a month from now, the 19th of April, before there would be another meeting to start reconsidering restoration enforcement.
Excuse me, I do believe we're going to be switching the 19th to the 26th.
Oh, that's right. My mistake.
That's all. No, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, we hadn't talked about it yet.
Yeah.
As a group, but so, just so people know, it looks like we're doing the 26th.
I guess this is a question for you and for you, but do we actually need another filing, or can it be a condition under this notice of intent to get this thing moving? Because we did talk about digging test pits in there the last time that Greg was in here, and it seems like another filing is duplicative, that he could do these test pits under the current NOI as a condition.
Well, I think as what Gabe was saying, I think we may want to keep these separate in case it leads to some type of a restoration project.
But when we do septics and stuff, we don't do a separate filing for the test pits. They just go out and do the test pits.
Right, most of the septics are not like this one.
No, but it's still a test pit. A test pit is a test pit.
Right.
It doesn't matter what you're going to do with it afterwards. You're taking soil samples.
Right, but the septics aren't normally under the enforcement order?
But that's just another reason you should be able to respond to the enforcement order and do test pits in order to take action to comply with the enforcement order.
And we would get a step closer and one out of the way, so they can deal with the enforcement orders and what needs to be done under those in terms of identifying maybe different resource areas if they pop up.
I can see both sides to what you're saying. Maybe this is something that legal counsel or DEP could answer tomorrow.
Right, and maybe we can get it moving that much faster.
So, if it is okay with legal, you could tell Greg, go ahead and do it.
Right, but there is the other argument to this too, of keeping it separate. One is an old restoration, and this NOI is for a new project.
But that's something.
But the test pits are just to analyze the soil you have.
Just to analyze the soil, test pits, again, they are an exempt activity under the Wetlands Protection Act, if they're temporary in nature. That's what I would be stating, is that it specifically cites it in the regulations that they're exempt if they're in the buffer zone. After we have that data, when we develop the restoration plan, that very well could be another filing, a completely separate filing for that restoration part. But the collection of this data and preparing that, I don't know that it needs an RDA filing attached to it. Again, as Paul stated, we typically don't do that when we do septics.
I kind of agree. We're going to do the enforcement separately, but even without the enforcement order on there, from the get-go, I wanted that gravel.
Right.
I wanted to know what's underneath there before I look at the project. So he's going to do, if he does a test pit this week, we are going to use the results of that for this NOI and the restoration, the enforcement. So it isn't as though the enforcement would be in this NOI they will end up being two separate, but the results can be used in both places.
One thing I'd
Yes, sir.
like to add, I know we're rushing to do the test pits, I think we all think they're a good idea. We would request that the commission have Bob Gray, your consultant.
Oh, we will.
We definitely will.
Yes.
We hadn't talked about that
Oh,
yet.
yeah,
but
no.
if we're telling Greg to get out there and do it this week, he goes and does
No.
it. There's got to be representation.
Yes, there does.
with Bob Gray.
No.
Yes, there does.
Bob.
Absolutely.
I mean, we would ask for it anyway,
Yeah.
so, under this notice of intent, so why don't we just move the ball a little bit, and then we get done what we need to get done, as council said.
Let me just run it by legal counsel. Sure.
Right, subject to you getting blessing, yeah.
Subject to the blessing that you receive. If you get blessing, we move forward.
Okay.
If not,
I'll call you at 9:15.
Okay, yes, sir.
I'm not trying to prolong it, I promise.
It's okay.
Can we be notified when they're being done?
Yes. I would think
Can we
so.
notify them when they're being done, Pat?
As far as us, I mean, property owner would have the permission. so-
Private property, they'd have to
Greg?
allow us on.
Can,
We can notify you.
okay.
And then one last thing, and I promise that's it for me. To go back to where we started, I think Greg was asking for the commission to provide guidance on the stormwater permit application, and I appreciate you pointing out that I specified the wrong one in my application. But as part of it, one that Greg read, I just want to read to you. And it was a stormwater permit threshold, 25%, or you're creating 25% or more impervious area on an undeveloped lot. Right, Greg? I was writing it down as you read it. So as part of that, the house itself is situated on an undeveloped lot. I agree with them that if you take all of the lots together, you're at 4-point-something acres. But there's no provisions in the regulations that allow you to say, well, you take all the lots together. The house is sitting on one lot, that's still a separate lot. Other lots are part of the application, but they could be sold off tomorrow. So as part of that, well, they're separate parcels currently, they're not one lot, correct?
They're one parcel. One lot.
Right?
They are separate parcels, they do have
Right.
separate forms of ownership, but the commission and the planning board regularly tell us that we have to look at the project site as a whole. There is a definition of site, and the site is a parcel of land or a lot or an area of property. So we've applied that 25% to the site, which is 4.79 acres. That's in keeping with practice on any stormwater permit that's reviewed for, say, a subdivision project or a larger scale project where you have multiple parcels. This is a multiple parcel piece of land.
And that specific item says on an undeveloped lot, it doesn't say lot or lots or site.
It doesn't use the plural.
That might be a legal counsel argument back and forth.
Well, I agree, we've got engineers playing attorney tonight, but I know we're splitting hairs, but I think it's an important point that needs to be resolved. We obviously are of the opinion that they should file one, and it should be heard concurrently.
Let Pat ask that question in the
It's on the
morning.
list. Hope he's in tomorrow.
I promise I have no more questions.
Okay.
Until the next meeting. Any other comments from the people in the audience? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Regina DeMasio at 16 Roberts. I'm right next to the Bristols. Will we be getting notifications as well? Or because we're butters to land, right?
Yeah, once the hearing is open, at the end of the hearing, we'll tell you when the next meeting is, there won't be any future mailings. If there's an RDA that legal counsel recommends, that just goes into the newspaper, that's not...
That's not a notification.
Right. If there's a big cleanup project, to remove it all, then that would be a new notice, and it would be a notice to butters.
Okay, then, so...
So the big question is, what are we looking at for the next meeting? April
Pat, first-
April 5th.
Well, it depends, it could be an REA, it depends on what the attorney says.
Well, I mean, we can continue this hearing.
Right.
for a
Right.
month.
Okay.
And If the work can be done under this current one, we'll still be done.
And if it can't, then we would get a vote on that on the 5th to move ahead. So one way.
Right.
so it's subject to what you find out from legal.
I'm going to make a motion to continue Sunset, 23 Sunset, to April 26th at 6:30.
Do I have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
There's no way we'll be that lucky. I'm going to go buy lottery tickets if that happens.
Should have been included. I'm not either. Yeah, you are a lot more than I am. You think
You know, the interesting thing, when you start going on that lot argument, you go, well, see that road? It's not on my lot, potentially. You know what I mean? Well, you know what I'm saying? If they're all around thing, and you're all about this road and the rest of it, and then now you want to use the lot for stormwater, well, cool, let's just look at the lot. Road's not on my lot.
Right. Somehow. True enough.
Yeah.
A lot of cooperation.
So we're at,
That was a bit of a brain teaser.
61 Glades.
This is for Grant, 161 Glades Road, 12 by 15.6 addition. On March 15, 2017, at 6:40 PM, the Town Hall, Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of Stephen Grant to build a 12 by 15.6 addition on property located at 161 Glades Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to apply. Good evening.
Yes, I do.
Is anybody else, you guys got them?
I got it.
We're good.
Hi, I'm Dick Rockwood. I'm here to represent the Steve Grant for their addition project. The house is in a flood zone, which is AE 15, and the present property is at elevation 16.16, so we meet the proper height elevation. So we're proposing to do, it's actually a 12-foot by about 11-foot 6 addition, because there's already a little utility room. This is a little color-coded copy, if it helps it. The little red shaded area, just to make that pop a little, to distinguish what's going on. We're putting a second story over the entire addition, so this is the new footprint. It also says deck to remain, but the deck will remain in the same spot but be rebuilt, because it's kind of hard to work and leave that small little 8 by 10 deck there. There is a, so we're in an AO flood zone, AE flood zone. The drawing that got submitted showed some concrete piers on it, but I discussed it with my structural engineer, and I now have a plan from him stamped, which I can give you if you would like to see it. And we have a strip wall foundation with knockout panels, which we have the right to do because it's only an area. This is basically, I just...
Right, I think it's reflected on this foundation plan,
Oh,
isn't it,
might be,
right there?
okay, so I
Yeah, I'm
returned
looking at
one.
it, yeah.
I turned in the change. I didn't have it in my own packet. So what we wanted to do is this strip wall foundation, which the rest of the house is. It was elevated years ago. It has a concrete foundation around it with knockout panels, and we're going to put the knockout panels plus in this foundation. We're into sort of that pricing, and it's a tough area because there's a septic tank there, and what's the best way to get there. But one of the things that came out, which is in these packets that I have, this is the footprint or the foundation, which we're doing here. There's already, part of this is built out as a cantilevered on piers, a little utility room, which is all at the right elevation. But there is a septic tank that's close by, so on the basis of the pier, the pressure of the footing being pretty much calculated at a 45-degree angle, how far in that wall was versus how deep we have to go. Peter Falk, the structural engineer, thought that this would be a better way to, to perform this, to be away from the septic tank, and not have to get down 7 or 8 feet, to be at the bottom of the tank. So we did this as a strip wall foundation with some rebar in it, so we didn't have to have that the footing in the middle of the wall. It's sort of one-sided, but it's all engineered, and these are stamped packets which I'll add information that, as I say, I didn't get until today, actually. We've been working on it. So it's a small, addition to the property, and it meets all the FEMA flood elevations.
My question is, I don't see any resource area and how far any of this is from the resource area. And I know over here is marsh. We were out there, for the island out there. And so I'm kind of at a loss for what you're doing, because I have no resource areas.
Was it over the 100 feet, so Bob didn't necessarily have to
That-
put on his plan?
on both sides?
I know Pat and I had gone through the project.
Yeah, it's in, the entire thing is in land subject to coastal storm flowage, but the marsh out back
Yeah.
appears to be within the 100. That's not shown on here.
My concern, because I know it's, when we were out there for the island, the roadway where they're
Right.
starting up, I mean, there's marsh right there.
Yeah.
And that would be off in this corner over here somewhere. But
Oh,
because,
it'd be up here too, wouldn't it?
well, there is the dirt
Right.
road there, yeah. So I'm just concerned because I don't have any footage at
I
all
would have thought it was within the
on
100.
here of any resource area, and I know it's not that far from the resource area.
That was one of the comments I had on the WPA form too. It's checked off as buffer zone, and it is buffered to a salt marsh, but it is also a resource area, and there's, the little blocks that we checked off and we noticed, so they would have to be completed. And the amount of land, coastal storm flowage disturbance, that would need to be identified on here too.
The amount as far as the square foot of what?
Yeah, the work you're doing within the
The work that we're doing is all in the area of an existing deck.
decks coming out. And
Right, there's a large deck there, so
Right.
2/3 of the deck is becoming living
Right.
space, but we're not changing anything outside of that.
Right, but that comes in a different part of the application. Just identifying where the work takes place should be on the notice.
On the notice, okay.
Yeah. And then there is buffer zone work, but the salt marsh is not shown on the plan. The buffer for the salt marsh.
Yeah.
Well, I
I
was
assume that
down
it
there
was-
today, and I just, I said,
Right.
oh, I'm not so sure that, where exactly we are
Yeah, the stone
in
wall.
regards to that.
Yeah. In the back, just beyond the shed, you can see a line back there, and I don't know if that was meant as the 50-foot buffer line. It's not labeled. That would probably make sense as the 50, but you're still,
If it is, but it doesn't
Everything is
say,
in the
so I don't
hundreds.
know.
Do you know what that dashed line is on top, where it's right below the right-of-way? Right-of-way? You know what that symbolizes?
No, it could be just a right-of-way road, the other side of it, because where the property line is, but I'd have to check with Bob Crawford.
oh, it might be.
Oh, yeah.
They just
I
say-
bet that's what it is,
I
yeah.
think it follows it.
Yeah.
I think it follows it.
I mean,
I
I don't
assumed
have,
that it was outside of this area that he didn't have it on because, no.
Yeah, part of it is when we're approving an order of conditions, we're approving the confirmation of the wetland line too, so we want to see that on there. That's something that could be added.
Yes. I don't think that based on its distance, it has anything to do with the board allowing or disallowing the project, if that's what it is. Is that something I could get and
But I don't
turn in?
know that, because
Okay.
it's not on the plan. You know, it's not showing me my 50 and 100-foot buffer, and I know it's out there, but I can't, from this plan, and when I was just eyeballing it today, I couldn't say how far,
Okay.
you know? I mean,
That
that's
appears to
my
be the
only
road.
concern with it.
See, this is the property line,
Because I could have,
and these are the two sides of the right-of-way, we think.
Yeah, we just, I
the
mean,
day if you would locate that.
Does that make sense?
I saw the same thing.
See if
She's
we can
right.
get 2 feet of snow.
She's right.
Just trying to figure out what ETW
but there's
is.
no snow out there.
There's no snow out there.
No snow.
See, if we didn't get it.
I know, thank goodness.
Because this looks more like the right-of-way.
No, well, let me see. Yeah, you're right, it could be, I don't know.
I would think that's the 12-foot right away.
What's the ETW?
I think that's the problem.
What is ETW?
Yeah.
Would that be
We have E-
edge of,
Where's that, Frank?
There's two
Right here.
ETWs. They're on either side.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm,
Could be, what he's referring to is his wetland lines.
I'm just surprised at Bob Crawford.
Edge of, it's not town wetland, edge of, I don't know.
Even outside, he usually puts it on, you know?
But the distance between them would only be, like, you wouldn't, that's like 25, 30 feet, you don't put, you know, it's not a 50 or 100 between
but
those
this,
two.
the scale is 1 in 20, right?
Right.
So,
They seem to be coming, is that, doesn't have anything,
so this is a 12-foot way, so maybe that is the way, this, between these two dotted lines? This is the way, but then I'm trying to figure out what,
oh, this is the actual
Yeah.
but then what is
edge
this
of the
line?
road.
Right.
And this is the legal where the road.
It's a paper street,
Yeah,
basically.
which is never really on its legal.
I don't know. Well, all the more questions that we don't have answered.
A little glitch there.
Just wondering if I had it.
If there, now, is the lot line at the top of the right-of-way? Right here? Is that the end of the lot line right there?
That's the lot line,
Okay.
where that changes. That's probably the gravel.
I mean, legally, if it's a paper road, they own to the middle of it. Just if it's a paper road.
They own to, not necessarily.
Well, from what I know.
It doesn't have to be a paper street, though, either. It might be, it could be a right-of-way by easement.
could be an
right,
easement.
Yeah, yeah.
What's here?
It could be an
What's here on
It
this
says
side
12-foot
right away?
right away.
It could be an
So I would
easement.
say that is the 12-foot right away, whatever's on
Okay.
the deed.
It could be an easement.
And this could be the actual,
Yeah, I don't think,
you know, but
for our purview, I believe it should be where's the wetlands line and where's the buffer zone. That's what we need to have
Yeah.
in here to do that. Let's keep going. Richard?
No, that's exactly what it is. Period.
Right.
no issues with the project or what we're proposing.
Well, let's-
Once I have to define that line.
Lisa, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I think we need to see those.
Matt?
No?
Is there anything else that is on the plan that,
Nothing else that I can see.
No, that's the only important thing missing.
The
Yeah.
only problem is if the
Yes.
line goes through, then you have a problem with your addition. I don't think it's going to.
Well, it's where there's a structure, actually.
right.
I think you have a problem.
I wouldn't be encroaching any more than what's there.
We can't.
Right, I understand.
Pat?
I understand.
Did you look into whether it triggered the town's floodplain bylaw? That stretch along there was on 10-foot contour through much of the town. I mean, it wouldn't affect as much what we do, maybe another step if it's in the town floodplain district.
Okay.
And it looked like the velocity zone ended either at the seawall or some.
I believe it is, yeah, based on the, which I don't have with me, the
Right.
town flood.
So you could do the concrete foundation with the vents, but you're so close to a velocity zone and...
The whole house is in front of me too, I mean, which is all concrete. so-
Right. I mean, we're encouraging people for their own good, so they don't get put into a high flood zone. If there's any way you can get it up or consider those things before the flood zone changes, I mean, we can approve something with cutout vents, but would somebody be better off going up.
With the concrete bid, when you say going up?
Well, no, right now, you're doing the concrete foundation with cutout fence.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're allowed to do that.
Yes.
But you're so close to being in the velocity zone, which you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd take a big insurance hit if the flood map changes.
But the whole house
Right.
is all concrete walls.
Right.
So it's kind
Right,
of.
but if you can do it, but if you're putting a ton of money into it, would it be better to use the piers?
I don't know that it would make any difference.
Yeah, and 10% of the house is on piers, the rest is on,
No, but I'm saying maybe you do the whole thing.
But that's not gonna happen.
yeah, they're not proposing,
I mean, that's people's own protection. The other thing is, there's a way to capture roof drainage somewhere, so that you're so tight up against the neighbors.
Okay.
There's a way to...
So we'll show one or two
Yeah.
single one fits.
Yeah, that would be fine. You have a house 5 feet to the left as you...
Yeah, there's a little open space
Yeah.
there, and a little bit of open space on the other side. So it's really the edge of the marsh and wetland line to be established on that.
In the two buffer zones,
And, yeah,
1,500, yep.
Are we, is there anything marking on this plan what flood zone? Are there anything showing it?
So it's in the notice of intent, but it's not on...
Well, it has the house at 16.16.
But it,
AE.
yeah, but it should be, there should be something on the plan showing,
Because we approved the plan.
Right.
That's part of the order.
Yep, that'll be put on there. It is at elevation 80-15.
and that's under the new
Yes.
FEMA maps?
Yes.
Yeah, the whole lot is in it.
So I think
So that'll be on the plan.
along with the
Yep.
marsh location and the buffer zone locations, I mean, I think all of this is an altered resource. There's already a deck.
Yep,
It's changing from one to the other.
grounds.
I know a deck is theoretically impervious where this would be pervious where this is going to be impervious, so dealing with some drainage. And it's also pretty much cobble though, too. It's not like this. It shows a couple of planting areas. So those already existing?
They're right behind the
Behind house. This is planting. And then the addition.
right next to the existing deck to remain.
Right, either side of the stairs, Bob.
Planting area, that,
Is that an
must be
existing?
stuff that's there. I mean, I haven't had any discussion with the engineer about
Okay.
doing anything. Because we're working within the existing, so that's what's existing.
Okay,
As we come down the stairs, must be the planting area there.
yeah.
They could keep those rose rugosas out front too, that'd be great, that's holding in a lot of soil in the front.
You stay out front
Yeah.
towards the ocean side.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're not touching
where the
it.
driveway, there's a lot of things up there.
It's just, again, we're moving in spaces very small. So.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this? So I think we want to continue this and get those pieces
I'll
on
have
it.
that put on immediately.
Sure.
Yeah,
I'll make a motion to continue to April 5th, at whatever time Penny says.
6:30.
And we may be able to vote that night, to have conditions in place. If
That would be very much appreciated. Summer guests are coming. so-
Got a vote?
All in favor? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. 6:30 on April.
Yes.
Bob, do you want this, this is the one that was shaded, do you want this one back?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You want the next one?
Good enough?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Someone?
Was this part, Paul, was this part of your packet?
There were a pile of them, they were all extras, so, I don't know, just leave them all.
Yeah, I'll put them back with this.
Yeah, there's another one here. Oh, no, that's Kane. There's a bunch.
Yeah.
You got the NOI and everything?
We've got multiple ones, yeah.
Anybody else?
I just didn't
send this?
Right.
have you sitting here.
We have too many.
Now we have more.
My son used to say we have too much
Hamel,
stuff.
7 Seagull Lane, remove and replace deck partially screened.
Where?
Oh, I'm sorry, that was on the RDA.
Yeah.
Scituate Realty Trust.
Where's Greg? There he is.
Greg was out there socializing.
So what do you call it?
Yes, that's the polite word.
Good evening. Greg Morse, representing the Scituate Realty Trust. Continued public hearing for a notice of intent associated with a single-family home. At the last meeting, there were 2 outstanding items. One of them was confirmation regarding the project in the floodplain and watershed protection overlay district. Agent Galvin and I did meet with Bob Vogel and have a determination that the project is outside of that district. The second outstanding item was the septic system approval with the Board of Health. Jennifer Keefe has reviewed the plan. She has not approved it yet. I'm expecting to get her approval in the next week. There will be no changes to the septic system layout based off of her comments, though. The limit of work in the building as you see it will remain the same. We are pulling back the foundation in the front to a slab foundation for the front 2 feet of the foundation. The remainder of the house will remain the same, though. The limit of work in the grading and the septic are all remaining as currently proposed.
So it'll be partly slab and...
The first 2 feet of the house will be a slab foundation, correct.
And that's related to septic distance to slab versus a full foundation.
So if you'd like to continue for 2 weeks to get that, we certainly are willing to do so, or if you feel you have the necessary information, we'd like to close the hearing.
Penny?
I don't have any questions, I think you answered everything.
Richard?
I'm good.
Paul?
No questions.
Lisa?
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Pat?
I mean, I would recommend getting the Board of Health approval on this, and the main reason is that we're within a foot or so of the 200, and to really be able to verify, well, measure it, have a stake in the ground, have them say, have Board of Health say, yes, it can go here, and then we take the measurements off that. It doesn't really slow it down, because they're gonna have to review it anyway. They're probably meeting maybe Monday on this.
It's Jennifer Keefe that will be approving this. It's not a board approval. I did go over some of the comments that she had, and things she's incorporating into her approval are that the buffer zones will be staked out in the field by a professional land surveyor. We will have to verify those measurements with respect to the wetlands, with respect to the tributary, with respect to the well on the opposite side of the street at the time of construction. Those will be staked and verified by a land surveyor. So I'm sitting down with her to go over those tomorrow afternoon, but we're comfortable with all of her recommendations.
Pat, can you just run back on the piece that you and Bob Vogel?
Yeah, it got a little bit confusing because the mapping that's on the wall in Town Hall shows an expanded area of floodplain from the 1972 map, but because of court decisions and everything else, we're using the paper 1972 map. Greg had shown that, and then Bob and I sat down with Greg and we looked at it, and we do a measurement. It's 50 feet off the center of the stream, and it's well more than that. And then there's the contour line that was using, it was 100-foot contour. So I don't even know if it makes it onto the parcel, this part of the parcel. But it does, where the area of work is, it wouldn't be floodplain influence under the 72 map.
And the 72 map is the distance of the stream as well as contours?
Right.
So you...
We think that's how they figure it out, because it's mentioned on the plan, 50 foot from center of stream.
Okay. there anybody in the audience that wants to speak to this? Yes, ma'am.
Beverly Sullivan on Summer Street.
Sure.
So can you just tell me what is the question now? We're waiting for the measurements of the septic system? Is that it?
The Board of Health will either deny or approve the septic system for this project. And it's typically the Board of Health agent that reviews this, and they take their time to make sure that it meets all the criteria for approval. So right now, the Board of Health has not officially approved this septic system. Mr. Morse says he has notes from the health agent with her issues, and it sounds like they've been addressing them with the modification to the foundation and things like that. So, but there's no approval from the Board of Health for the septic system yet. No official approval.
So we're going to wait for that approval?
So the commission can do a couple of things. The applicant's saying we could close the hearing. They don't anticipate any other issues with the septic system. The peril for them is that for some reason, if the Board of Health changes something in the septic system and we've closed the hearing, then technically they'd have to start over with this process. So we can continue the hearing for a couple more weeks till we get a decision from the Board of Health and then close the hearing. Or we can close it tonight. And then what happens after it's closed, then the commission decides whether to deny or condition the project. If the commission feels that it isn't appropriate or it doesn't meet the criteria, it would be denied. They have to give reasons. If the commission feels that it can be approved, we typically approve it with conditions, certain things that we think are important to have on the site. So that's sort of the process.
So I looked on the board out there, so the measurements for a septic system, is it 100 feet from wetland, is that right?
Yes,
And is it 200 feet from any river or stream?
that's correct.
And 250 feet from a vernal pool? Is that right? Is that what they're going to measure?
I think that the measurements now are pretty much, they want to measure for the septic system. I think well, actually, why don't you read the list?
Sure. For the septic system, it was a 100-foot measurement from the private well at 157 Summer Street. It was a 20-foot setback from the full basement portion of the foundation and a 10-foot setback from the slab portion of the basement. It's a 100-foot setback from the septic system to the proposed private well. It's a 100-foot setback from the wetlands on the site to the septic tank and to the leaching system on the septic system. And it's a 200-foot setback from the intermittent stream in the tributary on the site to the septic system.
That's the main one we need to check on. And I think because water protection, water supply protection is one of the main things we're supposed to be doing. I mean, I think to take the measurement.
Right. So
Well, you'll condition it that way anyway. They're not going to get to build it if it doesn't comply with the measurement that's in the order of conditions.
It's not like a stream or riverfront river protection. It's DEP's, water regulations, Nautical hazards, water supply.
So could those measurements be verified over the next, if we continue this for 2 weeks, can those measurements be verified?
State and field, yeah.
Okay.
It will be tough to take those measurements with a tape through the vegetated forest. And, we have a land surveyor that has gone out with lasers and transits and physically located that tributary, and that's how we've established the buffers. We will stake out the septic system if you want to pull a tape. It's going to be hard to get the degree of accuracy necessary with that method, but we will certainly do that for you if you'd like.
Yeah.
Get another.
The gentleman
Yeah,
over
hold on
there.
a second. So, is that something that you want to physically do?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what Greg's saying. You can get a, real accurate measurement with different things than a tape measure, but I think we've done this in the past just so that we can, we've been on site, we walked it, we can tell commission members and the public what the distance is.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And just, you want your name and address?
Spatula, 157 Summer Street. What's the distance between the project and my well?
Sure. The septic system is set back 100 feet from your well.
Yeah. What's the setback of the house, if that makes any difference?
Sure. Setback from the house, it's approximately 30, 35 feet off of the roadway.
That's pretty extreme, isn't it?
The minimum is
That's right on
30
the
feet.
road.
The minimum is 30 feet, it complies.
Really?
This is from the house to the edge
Of the street.
of the street layout.
Right.
So the road is actually a little further away than that.
Yeah, I can see it every time I come out of my driveway.
Okay. Anything else, sir?
No.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to try to make this brief, because I know you guys don't...
I know, we know you know you, but you have to say your name and address.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Doreen Close, 132 Summer Street. I don't want to fight with you guys, but I have a few issues. So, this is in a floodplain on the maps that you guys just did. I mean, really, the septic system is in a floodplain of the, not just a floodplain, which is hard enough to put a septic system in, but the floodplain of a watershed. And you keep referring back to this 1972 map. However, it clearly states, and if you look at the reason for these floodplain bylaws, it's to protect water. And this is Cohasset's water supply, and I'm not sure if you guys, I know you guys met with them, which was nice, because this particular watershed is kind of an orphan. There's nothing in our bylaw that protects it, but in state law, it's protected. It states here that if you're going back to the 1972 map, it says, in relation, this is 470.2, in relationship to other districts, the floodplain and watershed protection district shall be considered to be superimposed over any districts of the bylaw, and in the event of any regulation of this floodplain and watershed protection district are in conflict with the regulations of any other districts, the more restrictive shall apply. And it just seems to me that when you are, even though it's not in your watershed district, it's protected by the state in the most, watersheds are protected in Massachusetts more than any other piece of land, because it's that important. If you're in a watershed, there definitely is a conflict between overlays and districts. And to say that this 1972 map shall apply in this circumstance, when your maps that were recently done clearly show this in a floodplain.
When you say your maps, Mrs. Post.
Your maps.
When you say your map, what
maps.
Okay, what map are we referring?
You didn't see the overlay zoning maps that you people just did that showed this septic system in an absolute floodplain?
This is the one that's on the wall outside the planning office that we had talked about. The 72 map has the 50-foot from the center of the stream. This other one just shows a shaded area where the floodplain was.
And who generated that map?
It was contracted out to private map, an engineering firm. So we went to the building department, which oversees zoning, and their interpretation was, the 72 map is the one we use, and it's gone through court. And, I saw what you saw.
I read that decision, but that's a totally different kind of decision. This is in a watershed, which was not the same case in that case. So to say this 1970, I don't know why you guys have these conflicts with two maps. Like, have one map, or you told me that the reason for this, keeping the 1972 map, was to be more restrictive, or have the potential to be more restrictive. Now you're telling me you're going to go back to a map 50 years old and be less restrictive in a watershed. It's just...
The one thing, it is a lot more restrictive, because if it wasn't there, you would be able to put a septic 50 feet away, but in this case, you have to keep it 200
the law,
feet.
no, but 50 feet, 50 years ago, or 40 some odd years ago, when that map was done by hand, the laws are different now. The setbacks are different. That's why these maps have this in a floodplain. I'm telling you, this is not only a little bit in a floodplain, according to the maps that our town just did a couple of years ago. This is right, this septic system is in that floodplain. And to go back to a 1972 map, when it clearly states here that the more restrictive should apply, is I don't know, not right to me for watershed protection. And I don't know if Cohasset has been told that this is in a floodplain, according to our maps that we have and pay a lot of money for, but it is. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that originally, you know that the abutter directly across the street was not notified. And so I don't even know what the process is that we should even start this over again and do this properly with proper notification of the abutters, because that was not done. The third thing is, vernal pools, I've been asking, and you said you're going to look into that, but I don't want it to be on my behalf. I want it to be on the town's behalf, because there are vernal pools, endangered species, and protected areas within a block of this that have been designated. This particular area has more water and more vernal pools and more protected areas. It just hasn't been designated yet. And I keep asking for that, and I hope you do it, but not on my behalf, on the town's behalf.
I mean, what we can do on that is we can ask the natural resources people that are in fisheries and wildlife. What can be done if someone believes there's endangered species out there? You know, we can't walk on the property and go looking for them.
No, that isn't true.
Well, we've had 2 wetland scientists go out there. You know, we just can't have everybody that...
I'm not asking for everyone. I'm asking for the people that understand it, that have already designated 13 vernal pools a block away, because they happen to go out there. That's what I'm asking for. And the people that have designated endangered species a block away. And the people who have designated protected areas for threatened species a block away. To look at this area, because it's that important, really. It is. And the last, and so, you know, the spring is going to come, and we'll see these vernal pools, and they will see eggs, and they will probably see endangered species. Honestly. And the last thing has to do... The last thing has to do with the fact, and this is going to take an immense amount of research, but I shall find it. This was one swamp, as I said last time. It's the South Swamp, and Summer Street went through that swamp, and I'm not quite sure when that was all done. But they filled the whole road right in the middle of the swamp. They built an embankment, an encampment, or... Impoundment, okay, I get that wrong. On the left side of Summer Street, or the south side of the South Swamp. And on the right side, they filled it all in so that the swamp, which is wetlands and swamp, which is behind this little postage stamp, very strange little upland in the middle of 12 acres of swamp, was filled to protect the swamp from coming down on the road. I had this conversation with old Mr. Corbin about how this, and it's obvious that that's kind of how it went. So we have an impoundment, which, by the way, legally would require, if it's a dammed impoundment, 200 feet from that. And I suggest that it is that. it's a dam. A dam that's on the south side to protect the road. They built an impoundment, and that requires 200 feet from this area, in my reading of the law. So it's filled land. If it's filled land, you can't even do a perk test in it. It's against the law, and it's not right. So if you're going to leave it to me to try to prove that, I know. I think it's been a very long time. As you said, could have been 100 years for all I know, 50 years or 80 years. But if you're going to rely on a map that's almost 50 years old, why don't you rely on that too? So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
So with regard to the flood maps, we'll go through the 4 items that you brought up. I can only go by what our agent and our zoning officer come to the conclusion on. I realize that there's some maps that may be conflicting. I'm not sure of all these pieces. You've had the opportunity to look at that, and you've looked at it with our zoning officer, who actually has the jurisdiction of the flood piece. That we try to deal with things that are in our purview.
Yeah, I
Okay?
understand.
So the flood map is actually outside, that's under the jurisdiction of the zoning officer. So he's the one that's got to make that determination, but we've reviewed it. And he and...
So he's made that determination?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I'd like to see how he relates to 470.2, which says that the most restricted shall apply.
But he's the one he's also the building inspector, so he's got to issue, if this gets approved, he's the one that has to issue a building permit for it. So he'd be the one to address that question too.
Okay.
All right, not to pass...
Bylaws are the bylaws.
Not to pass the book, but that's his purview.
Okay.
So,
Well, I am finally requesting that you do close this hearing tonight, rather than...
well, let's go through the
Okay.
pieces, okay? I don't think that you get to request that, but,
Well, I'm only requesting, you guys
okay,
can deny
thank you.
me, you know.
A butter notification, that there was a person that was not or improperly notified, so do we, what was that, or what is that?
Well, it's illegal, because the abutters...
No, but who was the person and how did, okay, so, and was he on your abutter notification list?
No, at the first meeting, we did provide the list that was prepared by the assessor's office, and we provided notification to everyone on that. We met the burden of proof as outlined in the regulations. It was brought to our attention that there was an abutter, actually, there were 2 abutters that were not notified of the hearing. We did notify both of them in excess of 10 days ago in advance of this meeting so that they could be included in this public hearing process.
Okay. And I'm sorry, your name again, sir?
Bruce Munchler.
Bruce. So, and, I'm sorry,
I'm Amy Spencer Forrest, I'm at 159.
so you're the other person that wasn't,
Who was not notified until 2 weeks ago.
okay.
So much has gone on.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think about how do we address that. I mean, obviously, you're both here this evening, but you haven't had the benefit of all the prior meetings.
But Greg could only go by the list that was given to him by the town.
You understand that when an applicant comes to the town with an application, what they're instructed to do is go to the town assessors, and the assessor generates a list for them to follow. So it's kind of in a little bit of a pickle. The applicant did what they were supposed to do, or the list that they were given. However, it's incorrect. So,
Well, we have everything on YouTube. If a commission member misses a meeting, they're required to go and watch YouTube and read the minutes from the meeting. And that may be one way of catching up on, I guess, there were 2 or 3 meetings that were missed. If,
well, I mean, we can't, you can't go both ways. I mean, they do follow they follow the rules. So to say to them, well, you're going to have to restart the whole process.
The rules weren't followed, though. I don't, whose fault it was is irrelevant.
Okay. Well, that one we can ask town council what they would do, but I think Pat's solution is fairly reasonable. Because we don't have this Board of Health piece, maybe the correct thing to do would be to continue this for 2 more weeks, and if there's any questions that these folks have that we could answer or get the information to, we'd do our best to get that information over the next 2 weeks. Aside from that, I'm not sure what better solution we could come up with.
I suggest closing the meeting and then doing this properly, because there have been so many missteps all the way along on this one. I know it's complicated with different overlays. That's what I'm requesting, because I don't think that it's...
Well, we have a town council and people that could, I appreciate your thoughts on it, but I get it. So I think that's what we're going to take a look at and see if we're following the correct procedure. I don't know what else to do with that.
I'm comfortable with postponing it 2 weeks. And keeping it open for that period of time.
And I think not only with the Board of Health piece, but in lieu of this, I think maybe we could get some advice on that. All right?
Great.
With regard to the vernal pools, we have this registered vernal pools, and then there's sites where the sites are inspected. So we've had 2 wetlands people walk the site, the applicant's wetlands person, and then the town's consultant to look for vernal pools. And a vernal pool has some definition by the state, so it's relatively, not that additional vernal pools can't be found, but the site's been reviewed pretty heavily, and there are no vernal pools, to these experts' opinion, within the distance that's required. So, again, I don't know, let's just say that we were to deny this project on the basis that there may be a vernal pool there. That certainly would not bode well for this commission. So what we're trying to do is follow the guidelines that are given to us with regard to that piece.
Okay, if I may just, for 1 second.
Sure.
Before you go on to the final issue. I don't think, until now, I haven't even heard that they were looking for vernal pools, but now you're telling me they were looking for vernal pools.
The wetlands experts that go out into the field, and on top of that, our agent was out there, not that a commission members are expert at finding vernal pools, but there's been a good number of people.
I know, and they were wrong, and they were wrong, and they were wrong, so in terms of other issues on this.
Okay.
Don't get angry, please, because those are the facts, please.
The piece that became corrected was a tributary piece, which again is technically not the purview of our commission. But we took that in, and to your point, that piece was there, and we brought a person from the state to address the tributary piece.
I think the bigger issue was that it was a watershed outside of our bylaw, and that's what made...
Well, it was a tributary, and it goes to it goes to a drinking water supply, and to that end, Town of Cohasset was involved, and we've followed that avenue as well, including attending their meetings.
I thought that was a great meeting.
Okay, so...
But do they know that now this is in a floodplain of the maps of Scituate?
They're concerned, they have all the information that you have.
Because this is fairly new, this floodplain issue. So one last, final on the vernal pool thing. Final on the vernal pool thing. I understand that you can't, like, deny a project for what may be some neighbor who says. But what I've asked for over and over is the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife Heritage, and I've tried, but I'm not getting a response, but the town really should, because it's only logical, if there are 13 a block away, that listen, I live there. My son pulled out a little spotted salamander that's an endangered species years ago. And I made him, like, bring it back. I've been searching for those pictures, actually.
Sure.
It's a very sensitive area.
Yep.
So I do think it's important to really classify the vernal pools out there, and there are vernal pools, and you can't really see them when it's fall, when we've had a drought, when there's snow. In the spring, you'll see it. The eggs are everywhere. Because like I said, if they don't see things as a tributary, which I see them as tributaries, then they have to be a vernal pool, because they're, you know, if they're not moving, then they're big ponds that are there, and they're there. So
Okay.
that's what I'm requesting, and I don't know how to move that forward, but I'd like to try to move that forward, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had the two people look at it. I can certainly, what I had mentioned here was email the natural heritage person who we've met with on another project and ask her what her advice would be in this situation. She may say to wetland people out there, they didn't see any depression that looked like a vernal pool that might.
Pat, if you can get an answer on
Yeah, because
that.
they're not going to go out there.
Right, okay.
No, well, they certainly won't if you have that perspective on it, but is it a person that I might be able to talk to? Because I know there's vernal pools out there.
Yeah, I can.
You suspect that there's vernal pools, but because you're not an expert, you do not know that there is.
All right, that may be true, but...
And they could be further away. They could be 300 feet from the site. I mean, they may
That's
very
true.
well be...
Or they could be 100 feet, or 50, or,
Okay.
you know.
So I will email the person, I'll CC you, and then you're free to email her too.
All right,
You'll
thank
have
you
her
very
address.
much.
This is a person that's coming to the town on another project, but
Yeah.
she...
But I really don't, I really, you know, to say, oh, we went out there and looked in November, December, January, you know that. It's the spring when you have to look at vernal pools.
Well, they're able to tell wetland plants and soils and everything in the winter too. They do a lot of work in the winter. And what they look for in this case would be a depressed area that has the potential to be a vernal pool.
That's true, but there's a lot more to it with eggs and that. There's a lot to it, believe me.
Right, you know this isn't our first conservation meeting or our first project we've ever dealt with.
I know that,
Yes.
but you also know, Ms. Scott, that there are 13, 14, 15
That
vernal
doesn't
pools in
mean
Boston.
that they're right there.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's- I mean, we
Yeah,
have
let's-
sites where we've taken the experts out and they say, you need to come back in the spring, there's a depression, and lo and behold. They didn't say that here. So within the 250 feet, I have to feel confident. They know better than I know or you know.
I think we've established that Pat's going to do
So
what you
let
want.
Pat do that.
Okay.
And then the last one was Summer Street becoming an impoundment or filled land. And, you know, we only have so much history on this piece of property. We know Summer Street was constructed, but we can also see the topography of the land and the slope of the land. We know that that wetland or swamp that's off of Cedar Street, between Cedar Street and Summer Street floods, and then it rises quite sharply going up Judges Hill. That's the base of Judges Hill, and it continues up Judges Hill. It goes towards Heritage Trail, and we know that that's a continuous slope. So,
But this is like this. This is a...
but this is well above, the South Swamp. I mean, I've been in that South Swamp since
I know.
I was a kid, and I know where the edge of the swamp stops
Okay.
on the east side of Summer Street. And then it continues up a hill, and not to say that there aren't other wetland areas, because we've found them, but it's not part of
You
the...
look at the tributary that I thought was in the back, that you guys don't think is a tributary.
We don't get to decide what's a tributary. We can go out and look
I
at it.
understand.
We can go out and look at it. We may think it's a tributary.
That wasn't really my point, but
Okay.
you can see that the land is just like, it's not like it's going up Summer Street to Judges Hill. It's a swamp that has this bump in the middle of it that you're calling the upland, because it's clear.
If we walk through the whole South Swamp, if we go through lots of different areas, we'll find all kinds of changing topography.
Okay, well, it's up to me to prove that, and I'll be on that.
Okay, all right.
And the final thing is, we haven't done anything on the
I thought we were at final at 4.
I know, but I always forget, because this is complicated, what can I say?
Okay.
So you haven't done anything on stormwater at all. The last plan had like some big pond that you were gonna build, but now there's nothing. And again, if you look at, now we're in a floodplain. I'm in a floodplain, he's in a floodplain. And if you look at the floodplain laws, the number one and first thing is do no harm to the people next to you. And nothing has even been discussed about the ripping out of all those trees.
Wait, let's just, so the floodplain issue, I believe it's triggered by a percentage and by slope. So we have a bylaw, and it's quite clear how the stormwater
But there's a
piece-
state
Wait.
law, too.
Okay. You want to address the stormwater piece?
Sure. All of the thresholds of the town's stormwater bylaw were below all of the thresholds for disturbed area. Again, this is a 13.5 acre site. We're disturbing less than 15,000 square feet. The impervious areas, I sent those over. We're under 1% impervious, or 0.6% impervious coverage. It doesn't meet any of the thresholds of the local bylaw. The state requirements for working in a floodplain. A, we're not in a floodplain here. A copy of the FEMA map was issued with the notice of intent and included in it. We're in what's referred to as Zone X, area above the 500-year floodplain on the most current map with FEMA. Areas where you are working in a floodplain, what you're required to do is you're required to provide compensatory flood storage. We're not offsetting any storage, we're not doing any work within 50 feet of the wetlands. There's no requirement.
Are you,
Yeah, that's true. The one thing that we do ask, though, as part of the notice of intent, separate from the stormwater bylaw, is that you have some stormwater control measures so that you're not impacting neighbors. And that could include, what do you do with your roof runoff, where, you're directing your driveways so it doesn't flow out into the street and cause an ice hazard or something like that. So even if it doesn't trigger the stormwater bylaw, there are some controls we have.
okay.
I just want to mention, every 8-inch tree, okay, probably soaks up about 100,000 gallons of water a year. You rip down a lot of those, and that's a lot of water. We're all having problems with water, and we're begging you guys to notice, because we're low in all this ripping out of trees. So if you have 100,000 gallons of water for one tree, I'm not talking about the bylaw, I'm talking about the reality. And you multiply that times acres of trees that you're ripping out of there, that water, I don't care, you can drain it so it doesn't go in the street, but it's coming to me, because that's where it goes. This is a little bump, and I'm down here, and all that water goes there. And, that's where I started with this whole project, the flooding that I have draining the whole West End. And we aren't even, talking about that because there's a bylaw that says, it's 12 acres and you're only taking up this pervious. I understand all that. But the reality is, there's going to be big problems for me if all those trees that suck up all that water are taken down.
Well, the limit of work on this site is not acres, it's how many?
Third of an acre.
This is a third of an acre. Now, a third of an acre is still a large area, but it's a third of an acre in a 13-acre site.
Well, it's not about the site, it's about the displacement of water, is what I'm saying,
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. And a third of an acre, really, they're only going to take down trees in a third of an acre? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And it's a 3-bedroom septic system for, a 4,000 square foot potential home?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience?
It's going to be 4,000 square foot home.
Well, it's 3,000 plus.
Let's let the engineer answer the questions. Greg, can you tell us how many square feet?
Sure. With a fully finished first floor and second floor, it's 3,035 square feet, as you see it. That's if it's fully finished on both levels.
So that's first and second floor. So then, so we're talking about 1,500 square feet of a first floor, plus a garage maybe?
Correct. Total impervious, which includes the driveway, is 4,134. So yeah, your first floor footprint is 2,000 and change. and then you add the second floor over the main part of the house.
Okay, but our purview or concern is the impervious area. So
4,000.
the house and the driveway is 4,000 square feet.
Well, it's I know this is a different department for septic, but it's like a 3,000 square foot home, plus a garage that could have the master suite over it.
We're not debating the septic system design. That goes to the Board of Health.
It's a 4,000 potential square foot home with a 3-bedroom septic system, that's all.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience? Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
ask one other question?
You weren't at a lot of meetings, so you're entitled to questions. And don't feel embarrassed to do that. We want to answer your questions.
So, when I got the notice, I came to town hall and I looked at the assessor's map.
Mm-hmm.
And the assessor's parcel number, the lot isn't on that map.
Okay.
Because I know we're on map 23 and we're directly across the street, and that's on map, and it was listed on map 17. So when I first looked, I couldn't find the parcel on the assessor's map versus that. When I actually went to the Conservation Commission, they let me look at the plan.
I think it has to do with the formation of the lots, but go ahead.
Sure. This parcel is very hard to find on the assessor's maps. It makes up, I believe, if you take 4 maps and piece them together at the edge of town of Scituate versus town of Norwell, you come up with approximately where this lot is. I did tape the maps together and included a diagram of that in the notice of intent, but if you went to the assessor's office, you're right, you wouldn't find this. I took 4 maps and taped them together. It is listed with the town, though. It's map 17, block 4, lot 28.
But that often happens when you have multiple, especially when you're in the corner.
Okay, thank you.
And again, especially the folks that hadn't seen the other meetings, we want to make sure that you're fully aware of what's happened here. If there's other questions, certainly want you to contact the commission, make sure that all your questions are properly answered in advance of that, and whatever, it's not this commission that does that, not to pass the buck again, but as Mr. Morse is pointing out, when you live on the edge of the town in multiple map corners, unfortunately, and that's a problem. So we want to make sure that you get the information that you need and want. Okay? So I think best we'll do is continue this, and we do want to see if we can get some sort of at least get something out to Heritage and see if you can get any kind of feedback on it.
Heritage, measurement of the stakes, and then town council about the abutter.
Yeah, okay.
And the final word from Board of Health.
Yep.
Sorry, but is this 1 foot within the 200-foot setback? Is that why you want to, like, 1 foot?
It should be, well, the way it looked is 1 foot outside the 200 foot, so beyond the 2, so that's why.
1 foot.
Okay.
That's why we want to measure.
I make a motion to continue Lot 1, Summer Street, because I can't pronounce the name, to 6:30 on April 5th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Greg, excuse me. You may want, these are from the previous meeting. Yeah, okay.
At 6:30 on April 5th?
I think I might be sick.
It's like,
If you have a flight, you're going to find somebody else. How about Winslow, 107 Jericho Road, addition to a deck?
Yes.
Good night. Take care.
On March 15th, 2017, at the 7 p.m. meeting at the Town Hall, the Scituate Conservation Commission will hold a wetlands hearing under Chapter 131, Section 40 of the Massachusetts General Laws and Section 30700 Town of Scituate Code of Bylaws regarding the application of William Winslow to build an addition with deck on property located at 107 Jericho Road, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend.
Evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Brendan Solomon with Kevin R. Consulting, representing the Wilsons at
Can you shut
107.
that door, please? Thank you.
And, just a quick comment regarding the last presentation. I think that does qualify in the stormwater bylaw. The stormwater bylaw is any developments on an undeveloped parcel, not just a percentage.
The triggers.
Yeah.
We can work.
Yeah, but just, that's how I read it.
We did it in this past fall, we redid the
Oh, okay.
so,
Yeah, I think there's threshold sizes, yeah. Yeah.
Anyhow, so 107 Jericho Road, yeah, this is Jericho Road just opposite the harbor. We have a coastal beach across the street. It's in the corner of Bay Ridge and Jericho Road. The existing dwelling, split front to back, the garage under in the front. So the resource area is the coastal beach, which the 50-foot buffer just clips the front of the lot. We're not doing any work in there. The 100-foot buffer pretty much matches the rear of the house. There's a lawn area in the back, and the entire lot is in the flood zone AE 15. Those are the new flood maps from just last fall, November of 2016. We're in AE 15. Our main living floor is at elevation 19, so we're well above in the high and dry. The garage slab's at elevation about elevation 10. There's an open deck on the north, and it kind of wraps around to the front. We plan on cleaning that out and putting a smaller deck in, a smaller footprint, and an addition in the back. Total footprint of the addition is about 530 square feet. There'll be storage in the lower level, and the main level will be match the first floor of the existing dwelling at elevation 19, and it'll be flood compliant with flood vents. The addition, as well as the existing dwelling, we're going to put flood vents in the existing dwelling as well. There's no flood vents currently in the house at all. We have a flotation fence that comes in the entire project, and that's really about it.
Penny?
No, I don't have any questions on this project.
Richard?
You can go to Paul right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it looks, obviously, the house is in the resource area, but the whole addition's outside of the 100.
Thank you.
Looks good to me.
Lisa?
I can't say anything, so. Neither me.
There's the
Look around the corner.
Here's the 50, here's the 100.
Yeah.
Lawn area, and they want to go out that
So this is just beyond the yacht club on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
I have no question.
Yeah.
Greg, how much of an increase in impervious?
Like I said, about 530 square feet, the addition. It's, the deck there is an open deck that's there now, it's not a porch. We're proposing an open deck. I think there will be some trellis or something up near the...
I see that foundation.
Up near, up in this area here, but nothing is impervious. So the square footage of this, there's a couple architectural bylaws in the front. But the total square footage is about 530 square feet.
way.
He's getting rid of this.
Yeah, some of the other things is like roof drainage, you'll be able to capture roof drainage off of
Is
this.
this
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, we're kind of over 10, I think people kind of put it to the ground. It kind of was built with, the downspouts right now, I think go to the low area in the back here. And anything spills over, will go into the catch basin up on Bay Ridge Road. That's just like a low point in Bay Ridge Road there, so. It's not gonna go far.
And I hate to bring it up, but did you look at the floodplain map just to see if it triggers zoning?
Yeah, no, the floodplain is across the street on Jericho Road.
You got a 10-foot contour, but it looks like it's just a low spot where the...
Yes, yeah.
I think the only other thing would be, rather than a silt fence, maybe a silt sock. Digging up property.
So there is also, in addition to the addition in the back, there's some sonotubes.
Yeah, it's not increasing building, living space, it's really just an architectural detail to kind of, it's where the garage is, it's one of those, it's kind of cantilevered over.
Sure.
She kind of wants to fill in underneath.
Okay.
She being Heidi Condon, the architect.
So those are between the 50 and the 100, but they're pretty minimal disturbances.
Right, yeah.
And then the bulk of the, is that open deck already there?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, there's an open deck, it comes back, you can see the staircase coming down and around the back, all the sea and around the front. And then get rid of all this front line and just have a side yard there.
Got it. Is there anybody in the audience for 107 Jericho Road that wants to speak to 107 Jericho?
Make the motion closed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. It's disappointing one. There's nothing.
Yes.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
That was too easy. Let's get some more difficult stuff.
I think so. I look on the file.
We need core samples and test bits.
You had a butter notification, right?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. Are you here for,
We saw that you had irrigation wells.
okay, if it's just 1 second. So there's, I don't think anybody's here for those couple of RDAs, so we're just gonna do those?
Yeah, we could do this.
So they'll do this so you can get on your way.
Yeah, we're on the...
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. We're on the Town Water Resources Committee, and it's been something that we've been trying to learn about.
Sure.
We've been trying to attend any Board of Health Committee meetings when they discuss it, because we know that they're working on putting well policies together.
I'm sorry, and you're too, you're
Sorry, Martha Cook.
Yeah.
Debbie's Debbie.
Debbie.
So, I mean, it's not that we expected to be able to teach you anything or share any information, because you already
Sure.
have everything we have.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just curious, because, you know, obviously we're concerned. So we're just hoping that your committee has a lot more input and sway on this than ours does.
Well, I think it's important all the way around, and I've attended a couple of meetings, and when John Clarkson was part of your commission board. So we had been asked at one point to endorse the Water Resources Commission had like a whole piece of different water conservation,
Right.
which you guys have done a remarkable job. I mean,
Thousands of pages covered everything.
but it's amazing. And the public projects like the safety building and the middle school addition, the implementation of pieces that you had, it's all really impressive. And so water conservation is a huge piece of that, as well as what's going to happen around our reservoirs and things, and obviously the drought brought a lot of that to a head. On top of water for the town, obviously as a commission, we have concerns about water that flows in all directions, enough water to go over our spillways, to support wildlife. There's a number of different pieces that we think about. So we sort of had a little bit of a sticking point on the private well issue, and it's something that we want to deal with and deal with in a knowledgeable and fair way. And we've been debating how to get to that point. So it just sort of was on our agenda as something that we need to discuss, and we weren't I can see a couple of other things came up tonight that soaked up some time.
Right, right.
But
No,
it,
we're glad to know you are. 'Cause
Yeah.
We have been as well, and we batted around and played devil's advocate, and we should do this, we shouldn't do this, we should ask for this, no, we can't ask for that. So, yeah, we're just more here to listen to your point of view.
well, I think we need to get to one at some point on how best to think about this. We come at things from different perspectives. Just so happens last night on PBS, there was a big piece about California and their water dilemma. So you look at all these different issues that are going on. We've had discussions with our DPW on how we're going to make sure we have enough water, but at the same time address these other issues. So
Yeah, did you guys all see the private irrigation well non-essential use restriction that came out from the Mass Rivers Alliance? It got emailed out to everybody, and actually, before today's meeting, I knew a lot of those comments, so I read through it. It's really good, and they also have a model bylaw that DEP recommends, and it's really related to the private well outdoor use. And it's very detailed, a lot more information. Were you guys involved with this when they were starting to?
No, I saw it for the first time today, and it draws on research that they've been doing for years, and that several other groups have written papers on that are similar, that come to similar conclusions
This was
about.
Gabby Queenan.
Right.
And she had contacted our office and asked us to spread it, so we sent it to Water Department, DPW, to get this particular report.
Right. Yeah, I recommend everybody read that if you can.
It
It's
is.
only about 6 pages, but it's very informative, because some of the other documents that I've tried to plow through are a lot longer and a lot more complicated. This one is.
Pat, did you just send that last week?
Yeah. For the week, Carol, I think it was last week, we were looking for this and sent.
Is there any chance, can you just send it again tomorrow? Just, sorry.
Yeah.
I think the best part about it is it has been recently written, and it takes into consideration other communities' efforts and legal steps, because a lot of the information is from almost 10 years ago, and some towns have changed their bylaws, which now is reflected, which in some of the previous documents you don't see. Like Middleton is a real case study example, because they have a lot of people on private wells. They enacted a bylaw, which the Attorney General approved, saying that I can't use my private well for irrigation if the rest of the community is also under a drought restriction. So that if the public water source is being monitored and consumed, I also have to use those same bylaws. I can use my private well to irrigate my rose garden every other day between 8 and 7. So that passed, and that was on their books for a few years, and other communities did the same thing. But they had petitions circulated by 10 citizens with signatures, and it lost at a subsequent town meeting by 6 votes, which was not a very well-attended town meeting. So I don't know if that's a great example of what we would do here, because we have such a small percentage of people who are on wells compared to some places. In their Ipswich River Basin, I think it's much more sensitive, and they're closer to it, and they were having some really significant conservation problems. But I know that the Watershed Association is very active in pursuing this information, and they would love to see that enacted in all their local towns as well. We realize that it would be controversial.
Right.
There are going to be people who are really not happy about it, and it financially causes a split, because with an irrigation well going in at, say, $10,000, for the people who can't afford that, it drives a wedge, I think, between neighborhoods and promotes ill feeling.
Sure.
You know, if everybody in town is conserving as much as possible, and there's 50 lush green yards and washed cars and everything else, that's not good for the community spirit. And our belief that what we've seen from this paper, as well as many other papers, is that it's all coming from the same water source. So the belief of the homeowners who are in favor of this is my land, my water. The belief of all the scientists and hydrologists and everybody else is that no, it's not. That water is everybody's water.
So I have a question then. So before somebody goes to the expense of drilling a well, what have they been told? That they can use unlimited water because it's theirs? Or are they told in advance of spending all that money that you have to follow the same restrictions as the water that comes?
Right now, there are a couple hundred wells in town. Some are a whole house system, so it's their drinking water, health, safety, as well as they're allowed to use that for irrigation. Some people have just an irrigation well. I think what we're hoping is that this new policy, which could eventually be put in place, would not affect, well, it would affect current well owners, but our more pressing concern is potential future wells that could be dug. Because again, if you need a well on your property for your personal drinking water, for your health, for your cleaning, you should get a well. But what we don't want to see is somebody strictly dig a well just for irrigation. It adds, I think, a burden to the health department for one thing, because they have to be tested, they have to be inspected.
But as long as there's full disclosure, then it would be fair. I would think that anything that didn't have that restriction prior to spending all that money should be grandfathered, and then anything moving forward,
Well, no one else is going to drill one.
Right,
When
but
you're on the same water ban as the town and their water supply.
Right, but at least, you
not gonna
give
drill
somebody
an
full
irrigation well.
disclosure before
Yeah.
they spend the money.
I think that there's a couple of things. Even people that have a well that's grandfathered, I mean, some of these studies where they're showing that this water's drawn from a source that
It's the same.
is the same, that those people that are on a private well have to come under the same sort of guidelines as folks that are hooked up to domestic water.
Were they told that before spending the money? That's my question.
Regardless, at some point, when you're talking about water, if we were in a what her point was, I think, when you're in a community that almost everybody draws on a well, okay, so now your water is really the same as the water that's coming from our reservoir and is supplied to you by the town. When let's say that it's a community without a water system, so everybody's on a well. Now, if that water's in jeopardy of drying up, and you have a person that's just flagrantly using it, versus a whole bunch of other people that are trying to conserve it, they have to come under some sort of guidelines. Otherwise, they could impact not only themselves, but all of their neighbors. So,
And at the moment, they don't.
right.
In most Massachusetts communities. For instance, last summer, along Border Street in Cohasset, there were people with irrigation wells that, I think some of these homes had both personal consumption wells as well as irrigation wells that failed and went dry because they had drawn so much water from the table, and because of the drought, the water table was so low, then they had no water. I guess in a way I was kind of picturing this two previous plans that were going before you. I really wouldn't want to see somebody who lives near wetlands put in a well strictly for irrigation.
Well, the one that was here for Summer Street, there's no water main in front of them, so they're putting in a well that's both,
Right.
well, for whatever, I mean.
Right.
But what you would be saying to those people is, yeah, you can use the water just like anybody, for your bathrooms,
Right.
for whatever, but you'd be restricted to the same thing that everyone else in town when it comes to washing your car
Right.
or watering your lawn.
Yes.
And, we all go back and forth over what people should be allowed to have and not have, and where does that go? And I think the line sort of stops when you start to impact your neighbors or whatever. The piece that sort of gets in dilemma a little bit is you look at using good quality potable water, treated water, for things like keeping your garden and stuff. There's a lot of people that are adamant gardeners, whether it's a vegetable garden or flower garden or whatever. It's their hobby and their interest.
Have you seen the yellow house on 228 just before you get to 3A? On the left-hand side, across from where the farm is, They have the most immaculate, during the middle of the drought, the most immaculate lawn that I've ever seen. I mean, they were certainly using it for irrigation.
So but I guess my point is, we're trying to probably discourage people from using withdrawing water from our reservoir that should be used for drinking purposes, and people are using it to water their garden. So do we really want to discourage people from putting in wells to take care of their gardens and lawns? But if they do put that well in, they have to be aware that there will be some restrictions on that well.
Right, and that's perfectly reasonable, as long as they know that ahead of time.
Well, and then the other side of the puzzle we don't talk about, are there any plans? You can keep restricting and conserving and banning. Is there any plan? There's lots of more buildable land, like, the proving grounds and bigger houses going in. Is there a plan to increase our water supply at some point?
And that gets hugely complicated. I mean, stuff that we don't...
we don't want to get into that.
We have a budget the state gives us, and we have a good reputation compared to some towns. We have really made strides. The water department has been really diligent in correcting leaks. I mean, we're penalized. It's a bad thing to have what they call unaccounted for water. And you're allowed a certain percentage because realistically, 300-year-old pipes need 100-year-old pipes, which is one reason we've gone to such a major effort to replace old lines in town. And we're trying to educate all the citizens about how to conserve water. I would love to see everybody in town have a rain barrel and, less grass and more, again, there are a lot of ways to quit wasting water. We run up against special interests. And last summer during the drought, there was a real civil war going on between people with pools, and people with boats, and people with gardens. And again, a lot of this comes down to all of us from the state, and it is our responsibility to explain it to people in Scituate and to help make sure that they follow the guidelines.
Right.
And we've gotten better about that. There's been a lot we've learned, and the forecasts are that the droughts will probably get worse, and that there'll be at least one every decade, and sometimes that drought may last for 2 or 3 years. And again, the more we build, the more water we use.
Right, so this is just going to get worse.
And so, we just didn't want to see a development with 300 new homes and each home having an irrigation system, and a great big yard. That is not a good use of our limited resources.
Is there a way to change the bylaw that says any new construction from this point forward?
We already limit, we have restrictions on central irrigation systems, things like that are already being implemented.
That exists in the town. It's a couple of years old now. You cannot use drinking water in a home irrigation system. So that finished water that has been through our treatment plant, which we paid a lot of money for, is not going to go out on your grass. So a new development coming in, even a homeowner who says, gosh, I'm just tired of standing out there, cannot now tie into their drinking water. If they want
But they can drive a well.
They could put in a well, they could put in a cistern, they could put in a water catchment system, they could do all sorts of things if they really want an irrigation system. And again, though, we've got 2 different categories of wells here. We've got wells that are already existing and wells that could come down the road. We've already got irrigation systems existing and irrigation systems that could come down the road. So it's just trying to make things as consistent and fair as possible for everybody with the long-range goal of protecting as much water as we can for, like Frank was saying, it's not just drinking and firefighting. It's we have a responsibility to the streams and the fish and the everything that makes our community so beautiful.
One of the things that I've been sort of advocating personally, and I've spoken to DPW and to others, is right now most of our water is drawn from the area along the Herringbrook. Almost all the town wells, I believe, actually all of them, run along the Herringbrook.
They're somewhat spaced out.
But
They're
no,
sort of clustered by Old Oaken Bucket and,
Which is all in the drainage area of the Herring Brook.
right,
Situate has 2 other brooks, and all those wells are above our reservoir. So essentially, when we draw water from those wells, we get that water before it gets to our reservoir.
How deep are they though, Frank?
They're not deep wells. These aren't, most of our drinking water, they're not artesian wells. These are just, I don't know if they're 50 or feet deep or whatever, but...
I'd have to ask Sean, I couldn't tell you exactly, but we know...
Wow, so if they're that shallow...
Yeah, and there's a Kona draw, and there's all kinds of...
I mean, what's the aquifer? There has to be one, is there one large aquifer, like down on the Cape, that we're drawing from? Or is it different?
We're in a similar area. Our area is mostly what they call stratified drift aquifers, and then some crystalline bedrock aquifers. And again, our wells are different ages, there are different depths. They're looking at bringing a well that's currently been offline back online.
They're adding to another one.
They're adding to another one.
Because to apply for a new well takes 5 years.
Right.
Or thereabouts.
But you need to apply now, so in 5 years we can do it.
So you
Stop
have to
waiting.
start the process
Well,
of testing and everything.
Right.
And it's very expensive to do.
No, we know, and we've been talking with DPW about that as well. I guess my point is that down the road, as we move forward, and again, this is sort of outside of our purview, except that when we draw a lot of water from that Herring Brook drainage, essentially it limits how much water goes over the spillways and out of the fish ladders and things like that. And we're working on the other end with North and South River and other groups to make sure that there is a continuous amount of water that goes over these spillways. So all I'm saying is when the town in the future looks towards new drinking water sites, if they consider some other places other than just the Herring Brook drainage for that. We have the Scituate Brook, which at one time had a couple of wells off of it. I don't think either one, they're not online anymore. And there used to be at least one in North Scituate for Bound Brook, and that no longer useful. But, we're trying to think that maybe we should look outside of that area into other parts of the town to distribute the draw, because although, ultimately, I think it's all the same, to your point, there are these different sort of areas, and if we're spreading out that draw, perhaps that will lessen the impact on one particular area. And really, the area that we want some water to flow to, because we want our reservoirs to be maintained to some level. So if we start drawing all that water before it ever gets to the reservoir, we're sort of defeating the purpose a little bit.
Well, and I feel like with our wells around town, again, there are buffer zones that are in place that are required to...
It's hard to find locations that by the time you get in septic systems and all that sort of thing.
And I think it would make sense that we don't want to see a homeowner putting an irrigation well in within a certain distance of an existing town well.
Right.
That just makes sense.
But from our, we've been very involved in acquiring open space, say in the West End and things like that. So we protected these large areas.
Right.
And, not that we want to see them dried up, but there may be the potential that some of those places are actually spots that might benefit the town. Because we want to do this, we want to make sure that we do have enough, at least a minimal supply of water for our town when the need occurs.
Well, I know there have been some tests done on property, clap, and it was found to not have enough. There has to be a certain amount of flow and pressure and things like that to make it even worthwhile.
Right.
And so they've checked a few places where even the homeowner said, look, I'll sell you my land. I know we need it, and it turns out it's not viable.
Sure.
So for us, the cheapest thing to do is conserve.
Sure.
To lower how much you use is cheaper and quicker. And so that's the best solution.
Yeah.
And I think that what we are aware of is that some of the people who have been large quantity water users are the people who are seeking irrigation well permits.
Right. Well, like, you know, and then the flip side to that is you have people that have invested thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in their landscape, and they're looking at it and watching it die. So you kind of see what
Oh, sure.
what they're trying to work towards. But-
Absolutely, I understand.
And if you're not from here, you probably moved from a place that had sewers and you could run the sprinklers 24 hours a day. I mean,
Well, depends if you're in the far west, it'd be the other way around. They're telling you to put rocks on your lawn because you're
oh
not
yeah,
gonna
but
get-
like you go to Texas, Texas is a desert. You
Yeah.
can run your sprinkler system 24 hours a day, yeah.
Yeah, there are.
I think the reality going forward, though, is that landscapers, garden centers, you know, anybody with any sense about landscaping is going to help educate a homeowner and say, you know, you didn't choose wisely when you put in this particular tree or shrub because it needs a lot more water than we're going to get.
Right.
And so unfortunately, yes, you know, if you price special and cherry dye, it might, but you know what, then you'll put in something that doesn't need to be watered 10 inches a week.
Do you think that lobby would ultimately be opposed to this? Because it limits, you know, what they can sell, how much they can sell of certain plants? Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's...
No, I actually think that they're very environmentally conscious and very, I mean, if you talk to Kennedy's or any of the other places around here, they encourage people to put in appropriate regional planting.
Okay.
They're, you know, that's pretty much the standard.
Okay, good. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
The guys who put in sprinkler systems, their lobby will be against
I was
that.
going to say, I mean, if we've made anybody upset with our requests to ask people to be more careful about their water usage, it's well diggers and sprinkler companies and pool installers who don't like our way of thinking. And I think it's ironic because they're getting a lot more opportunity to address boards and share their point of view than environmentalists and hydrologists and water experts are. I mean, I've been to a few Board of Health meetings now where the people who were talking to them and trying to convince them one way or the other were well drillers. And that seems a little
We're all at
chicken
the
drive
same
the hen
meeting.
house to me. I mean, the Fox, you know, coming in to give testimony about how, oh, no, I mean, I heard one man say that our water comes from Canada. We can all over town and it'll be okay.
Yeah, Jen was saying the private well permit application was way up. Well, we just had Deer Common up here.
Well, it makes sense though, because you think, like Frank said, people build a home, they spend all this money, and then there's water bans, and they go, well, let's drill a well.
But what if they're not grandfathered then? I mean, it's...
Right.
Then that's...
But even to get a yard established or something like that, that takes some water. It's
Right. Well, and again, I mean, developers and homeowners and realtors all need to get on the bandwagon and don't try to put seed down in August and start a new yard. That's just, that's ridiculous.
This
And-
handout has a lot of information about that.
Yeah, I
Same things that came
you
up
should read
tonight.
it. Yeah.
It was really good about you can only plant in, you know, fall or the spring, and you can't, you know,
Sure.
you can only water at night, and there were a lot of good hints. You can have a lot of the issues we were talking about, like, well, what did you do about this? And they had
Right.
some good suggestions, so.
Safe practices, you know,
Yeah.
that low water consumption.
Okay, we're ready.
Yeah.
I don't see it totally being a way to work smart. I mean, that's like what we're all trying to do, is
Sure.
just be
Yeah.
smart about it.
And when you first put a lot in, it's gonna need more, so you're allowed to do more when you establish it, but then once it's in, you're back with everybody
2
else.
weeks.
Yeah,
That's all you get.
yeah.
Yeah, the water department was very generous last summer
not
when people came to them and said, well, look, I just had all this hydro seeded, and they said, well, first of all, you should check with us, we've been told you not to. But they did, they gave people exemptions. They could put a sign in front of their house and water
Sure.
because they were starting a new yard. But realistically, we should be discouraging that.
right.
because It wastes a lot of water.
Okay. Well, we'd like to keep up some dialogue
Great.
and see where we go with some of this stuff. And that is the good part about having things in a public forum and have that discussion. So I'm sorry that you had to get dragged.
Meeting, 9 o'clock.
I got a lot of sewing done, it was on.
We'll take a look at this and continue.
We meet,
I'd actually like to attend
the
the
last Tuesday of the month, and if you have questions, you could get in touch with, our chair is, John's retired now, so our new chair is, she go right now? Becky Malamet, yeah.
You're the last Tuesday of the month?
Yes, we are. Yeah, so feel free, if there's anything we can do, or you want
It's the
to...
Hummerock meeting.
Oh, is it?
For March.
Okay.
Doesn't happen every...
No, just one time.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you again very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Sorry
Thank
to,
you for sharing that information.
Yeah.
Well, frankly, that document has a lot of really good meat in it that is worth knowing about. And it's just, it's going to take time, but there are a lot of issues to go through, and we may have to pick and choose and not ban everything and not allow everything and find something in the middle, maybe,
Sure.
that's more customized to our own personal situation in town.
Right. Yeah, we'll certainly take it. What time and where do you meet?
Oh, we're next door in the DPW conference table, and we start at 7:30.
Almost past my bedtime.
You should be asleep by now.
9 o'clock.
I'm getting there, don't...
Yeah.
You didn't hear a yawn earlier.
That was a groan.
Oh, yeah, there were a few of those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
On March 15th, 2017, at our 6:15 meeting, the Town Hall, the Scituate Conservation Commission will act on the request of Gordon Hamill for a determination of applicability in the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Scituate Wetlands bylaws to remove and replace a deck plus or minus 10 feet by 16 feet located at 7 Seagull Lane, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend. And I'm doing that backwards. It should have been Walsh first, but Gordon Hamill. What do you want to tell us about that? Because we don't have a thing in front of us.
Yeah, these people were in a couple of years ago, and then they put the project off, and it's those condos that are down by the marsh.
Yep.
10th Street Marsh, and there is a deck there, I believe it is, or is it there? And it's going to be replaced.
So they just want to replace
They're
it?
just replacing it, it's not as though it's new.
Okay.
Pretty
Sounds good.
straightforward. But they are within,
Is it screened now?
jurisdiction.
No.
Or is that the addition?
No, I think it has a roof on it.
It doesn't
but I
As long as it's got the same footprint.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't care.
Yeah, that'd be the key, yeah.
Okay. Anybody in the
No
audience?
Nobody here.
Do I have a motion?
I make a motion for a -3.
Second.
All in favor?
Yay.
That would be just that it's replaced as is.
Yeah.
Okay. And then March 15th, 2017, during a 6:15 meeting, the Town Hall Scituate Conservation Commission will act on the request of Joseph Walsh for determination of applicability of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Scituate Wetlands bylaw to extend an existing rear deck 8 by 18 and property located at 7th Ave, Scituate. Abutters and other interested parties are invited to attend.
He's fine. That's actually fine. It's right at the 100-foot, but if anybody wants to see. This is the 50 up here. He's
That?
putting it on sonotubes.
What do you think?
Yeah, it's across the street, there's a marsh on the
Yeah.
other side of 7th,
He's,
and
Okay.
most of the work
he's
between-
really fine, I
Yeah.
think. Looks like it to
They
me.
they may be in the town floodplain, so we could let them know they have to talk with zoning.
Well, they'll have to talk to zoning when they get a permit to build the deck.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we'll get it fine. Does anybody have a question?
Does anybody have a motion?
I do, but I want to make sure nobody wants to say something.
Keep it moving, Penny. You're
I
doing
make a
good.
-3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. Okay, orders of conditions. McKelvey,
yeah.
89 Edward Foster Road, raise and rebuild.
I make a motion we accept the conditions for 89.
Well, this is the one that also had, we were wondering if it triggered the stormwater bylaw was just Marabitos there. So on this one, with written conditions, the other one, he showed it in color, and we were able to determine it was under 25%, the one at 94 Crescent. This one, we're going to meet this week. So what I would suggest is voting to approve contingent upon him showing, because again, the drawings you gave us were off.
Right. Or we could say contingent on meeting the requirements of the stormwater bylaw, then either way.
Okay.
He has to.
Make the motion, Paul.
Yep, works for me.
All right.
Come to life when we want to get out of here.
Real good suggestion.
All right, I got that motion. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Di Filippo, 199 River Street, septic.
119.
119. Thank you.
Septic repair, I make a motion, we accept the orders as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then Pitts, 94 Crescent, raise and rebuild.
That one, he did show that it was under the 25%. I think he
And
took
we were
some
gonna add,
driveway out.
and we asked for some sort of
Yes.
mitigation, drainage
Yeah, at the end of
at the end of the drive.
That's in the conditions.
Okay.
Make a motion to accept 94 Crescent Avenue, Pitts.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Sorry.
No.
Okay, do we need,
Carol's going to be confused, though.
certificate of compliance, 365 CJC Highway.
That's the new building, right?
It's an antique.
That was septic, but there were two old outstanding ones that I think they cleared those up, Carol, did they?
They got an order of conditions.
One was never recorded.
Yeah, they got an order of conditions for a pool, and then they took the pool out.
Pool's out, yeah.
All right, so you took
And
care
the
of that.
septic is,
We don't have to vote on that.
And you're good with that?
yes, the septic in, I mean, we haven't.
No, it's not.
I mean, it's in, but...
They're making the deck up to code right now.
Okay, that's good.
Well, if Matt's on top of that, I'm not worried about it.
All right.
We don't even
I
need
make
to.
a motion.
We don't need to do anything else.
No, I'm doing something else. To accept the minutes of January 4th, January 18th, February 2nd, and February 15th, as written by Carol.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
You did that right.
Lisa, are you with beach committee now that Bill isn't or not?
I'm his fill-in. When he's not available.
There was a request to get their information onto the town website, like beach access, beach parking, all that beach stuff, so that people that want to find out where to go, they don't have to call every department in the town. So I was just asked to bring that up with.
Tell them to do it, Lisa.
Yeah, that's what he's telling her.
No, I'm gonna, so beach access, beach parking, what was the third one you wanted?
Stickers,
Just any
maybe?
information that the beach committee has that they want out should get onto the website.
Okay.
And I can't think of who told me to ask, but I'll.
It happens.
Yeah. It sure does.
Coastal Advisory,
Got postponed last night.
yeah, we had, finally, we're gonna have a meeting.
Oh, we had a storm.
You should have had a field trip.
Yeah.
And it was posted.
You don't cancel, yeah.
It would have been illegal.
Finally.
Oh, boy.
Do we care about Peggy Beach issues tonight?
You doing
If there's
that?
been no changes, don't tell us.
Still a mess.
Something happened.
Something
Yeah,
happened.
something happened. They.
That's good.
They retested. They retested before we believe they should have. They should have reported to DEP.
Yeah.
We could have told them then.
These guys just can't,
Right, so
They're a
Jen's
nightmare.
involved and I'm involved, and we're trying to get another retest and a written thing to DEP, and it hasn't happened.
This is a joke. It's going on and on and on. And the whole winter, the contaminated soil washed out on.
We have to start a conservation hall of fame for like Candlewood and, if you're on long
I don't
enough.
think we're even close.
Next one, Frank.
So Peggy Beach, is still pending.
It is gonna be 10.
24 Webster, we're not gonna discuss.
Okay. Gilson Road?
Gilson Road culvert, I know that's just a DEP,
That's,
I mean, that's a DPW project that's on.
They have a study going on now.
what those people talked to,
We just did the private wells,
what have mercy.
the reservoir,
Spinach and fish ladder. We had a meeting in here the other day with state officials, the engineering firm is Tetra Tech, and Al's kind of running it for the town. There's going to be a lot of permitting for this one. This is a big...
Yeah, it's down in the reservoir,
Yeah.
tap that.
And one of the biggest issues is when you flood a wetland, it's still a wetland, but you've changed the wetland,
Yeah.
and you have to do a replication of it. What you have to do.
Really?
Just changing what type of wetland it is, but, so there has to be a study done on that. But on the 24 Webster
a lot of
thing,
studies.
there was a proposal that was sent around, and my recommendation be to reject it, and, you know, if he wants to file and come in and, again, say, I want it to be 2 feet high, let him file.
But I think I sent an email back to Brandon, and he responded that discussion about 24 Webster, because it's in litigation, needs to be in executive session.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on.
Sorry, but I just...
Yeah.
Yep, now I
He
remember your email, yeah.
answered it was a one-word
Yes.
answer.
Yeah. April 26th, we already took care of that. 30
So
yeah,
I
we
think at
did.
the next
That's
meeting, Carol, we need to put an executive session on, sorry,
So we can chit-chat.
sorry. I shouldn't ask,
You look thrilled.
I should have asked you tomorrow.
What about 36 Border? Is she still building the house on the rock?
Yeah, I sent emails out there. This is
Yeah.
a real mix-up. She started a project, put a septic in the right time
I didn't even
frame.
know she did that.
Yeah, and then some time went by and she asked us, could
Years.
she extend it? We said, yeah, you could extend it.
right.
But, yeah, you have to fill up, you get that message part of it. So it's kind of a misunderstanding. She didn't think she needed to file. So my thought would be if there's a way we can get her to get an approval from, I don't know, DEP, if we just
That'd be
say-
great.
Because Jen said, oh yeah, you're all set, you're extended, and that was on the...
So she started the work,
Yep,
and, I mean, this is not,
She's tried to do it right.
right.
This is the woman that came, walked up.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
The last meeting.
And she did request it, she thought that was sufficient,
Exactly,
and we answered her, yeah.
yeah.
But,
Right, and part of it was we thought she was during that time. You know,
I think it's a reasonable mistake, and hopefully there's some simple
Right.
solution for her to do that.
Yeah.
Can you,
Yeah, I was gonna start with Greg to see if let's get these all.
Right, there's got to be a vehicle to
Right.
extend it.
Right.
okay. All right,
We're done. Oh,
Russo's handwritten, I could give you copies now, or I could have it typed tomorrow, I can type tomorrow.
that's fine.
Are we finding them here?
This one is way back, and...
Yeah, no, I've actually looked at them.
Yeah, they asked us to go through the MBTA file.
Oh, okay.
And so now we're done with that, and now we can mention files.
Okay.
Have we found anyone?
yeah, what, the man on Gannett Road, his
You want a motion to
wall is
close?
still up.
Motion to close?
Second.
Make a
All in
motion.
favor?
Aye.